And welcome back, fellow football fanatics, to another episode of College Football with Sam. Let's get straight to the point here. This is one of the bigger weeks in college football because we have a high-impact, high-stakes Big 12 game, BYU Texas Tech. We have a high-stakes impact Big 10 game, Oregon Iowa. That game I don't even have a pick for. We're just going to be giving you a broad stroke early preview with lots of monologuing in regards to that game because I need to watch some highlights tonight and this morning and some film, scrape as many corners, many sides of the barrel as I can with both of those teams before making a pick. I'm having a really, really hard time to pick who's going to cover and also who's going to win. I have multiple different parts of my brain pulling me in different directions. We also have a few high-stakes SEC games. Not quite as high stakes as next week with, Texas, Georgia, for example. But we do have Texas A&M versus Missouri and LSU versus Alabama. And we have a game that I would argue is high stakes on a personal level for a certain fan base. That being UCLA versus Nebraska, or Nebraska versus UCLA, because Nebraska's the road team. But welcome in, everyone. I know that there aren't notifications being sent out for this because we released a ton of clips today. And, we were supposed to be live earlier this morning, but change of plans. We'll try to be live tomorrow morning. Welcome in, everyone. Thank you for being here. We are going to also talk about my top 10. We'll be doing a college football playoff prediction segment tomorrow. Just with not knowing where I was going with Iowa and Oregon, I didn't want to pick one of those teams to win and then the playoff bracket not reflect that. Because if Oregon loses this game, they're not hosting a playoff game, I don't think. If they do win this game, there is a path for them to still get to Indy, potentially win the Big Ten, and they're certainly getting a home playoff game. Because I do think if Oregon wins here, they are not losing to anyone else on the schedule. I think that Iowa on the road is much tougher than Washington on the road and much tougher than USC at home, and certainly tougher than Minnesota at home. So those are my thoughts. Welcome in. Our goal is to make sure that you are the most informed college football fans. So to maximize your opportunities to learn more, to get more information, to make more accurate picks, make sure you have liked the video, the live show, that you have subscribed, and that also you've hit the notification bell so you can get notified when we go live Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Sunday is the day of reactions. It is the day of letting everything out, and then Monday we start anew. Tuesday, Wednesday, we dive deeper into matchups and also maybe take a little bit of a look back on last weekend's game for some deeper, more in-depth takeaways and what it means about the team that we're talking about, the team at hand for the rest of the season. But let's kick this off by talking about my Week 11 power ratings, my top 10 teams. College football has been entertaining week over week over week. And even though we are 11 weeks in, I don't think there is much separation inside of the top 10. We are, however, seeing a few teams begin to pull away. I think we started seeing this a little bit last week or a week before, and it's showing up again, especially in the power ratings right now. My top 10 is based on power ratings. It's not rankings. It has nothing to do with strength of record outside of how wins and losses impact how a team is viewed in terms of favorability on a neutral field. Those are what my power ratings are. So here are my Week 11 top 10 teams on a neutral field in my power ratings, not what I view as the best records, because that would be an entirely different conversation. If we were talking about best records, BYU would be in the top 10 and occupy this 10th spot or be higher instead of Utah. But Utah is here. Utah is one of my 10 best teams in America right now. The way that they are tearing people apart, the way that they are just slicing and dicing, they play sound defense, They are physical offensively. They have a wonderful offensive line with Spencer Fano and Caleb Lomu at the tackle positions, and then Devin Dampier and Wayshawn Parker. They make quite the rushing threat. I know they're in the Big 12. There is another Big 12 team who's on here because we would not be putting Utah in the top 10 if Texas Tech couldn't be in the top 10. That would be pretty ridiculous. But Utah, with 2 losses, a close loss to rival BYU on the road. Rivalries are weird. Utah statistically outperformed BYU in that game. BYU, just with home field advantage and good coaching and a little bit of luck that they created, won that game. And then Texas Tech, they blew out Utah in the fourth quarter, but Utah was able to keep that competitive against a pretty healthy Texas Tech squad, minus Baron Morton. But they had a healthy Will Hammond, and they were competitive for 3 quarters there. Love Utah. Wouldn't be shocked if they went out and find themselves in the Big 12 title game and potentially in the college football playoff. But that's a topic for another day. Notre Dame was, I believe, 7th or 8th in last week's ratings. 8th, I believe. I think USC was 9th. USC dropped out because they did not look all that impressive against Nebraska. They only won the game because Nebraska's quarterback had his fibula snapped in half. That's the only reason why. Notre Dame drops a little bit because we've seen now Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price are incredible. And CJ Carr looks phenomenal for a redshirt freshman coming off of a season-ending injury where he couldn't see the field last year. That secondary, though, still a little bit vulnerable, and that offensive line is not what it was last year. Either that or they still miss Riley Leonard and therefore cannot fully optimize their ground threat. I still think that they are going through some things that are going to be hard to correct without a whole preseason of work. So that's why I don't have Notre Dame higher than 9th. I'm lower on them than the sports books and most consensus power ratings are, to a degree that I'm not lower on any other team, really. So with Notre Dame, I think they're one of the better teams in America, but I do think they are a little bit overvalued when you look at who they've beaten, who they've lost to. That Miami loss isn't aging so hot after we have discovered more of who Miami is. And their secondary is a permanent weakness that will be exploited by probably 3 or 4, maybe even all 5 of the top 5 teams that we'll be talking about here that are basically the consensus, if not unanimous, top 5 teams in most power ratings and metrics. Number 8 is Texas. This one shocked me, but with how they dominated Vanderbilt for 3 quarters and with how they have played at times like the number 1 defense, other times like a top 15 to even top 10 offense, how they had a great offensive line performance against Ohio State, given how good that Ohio State defense is. They have all the pieces to be a national title contender. They just haven't put it all together. They have more pieces, I think, to work with than Notre Dame does. Again, Notre Dame, I think outside of Leonard Moore, their secondary is busted. That will not be an elite unit. It's incapable of that. Texas has the capability of, I think, being pretty great almost anywhere. They've been figuring out the run game a little bit. They ran pretty well and protected Arch fairly well against Vanderbilt, who has one of the better defensive fronts in the SEC. And they pieced Vanderbilt apart for 3 quarters. If you box score watched, you would not have seen how Texas was dominating Vanderbilt. But Vanderbilt, being scrappy and well-coached, came back. I still don't think Texas will win it all. I don't even think they'll make the playoffs with my very early read on their team and remaining schedule. But they are good. They're power-rated top 10 for sure, and I believe that last Saturday showed why. 7th is Texas Tech. Told you we couldn't include Utah without including Texas Tech. Texas Tech is a physical, mean, nasty team. And while I do not believe they have the nation's number 1 defense, opponent-adjusted points per play, or EPA per play. EPA allowed per play. And ESPN's efficiency metrics, which is, opponent-adjusted points per play, EPA per play, similar stuff, a little bit of a different methodology. They both have Tech as the number 1 defense in America. Do I think it's better than Ohio State's? No. I don't think it's better than a healthy Texas defense. I don't think it's better than Indiana's defense just as is, even with some of the, even with Aiden Fisher out, Indiana probably has a better defense. But it is a top 5 unit. And that defensive line and pass rush is scary. When they were playing Kansas State, either Kansas State here or there was able to get a good quarterback run with Avery Johnson, who was, Hot Wheels, or it was a sack and a hard hit. That defense helped them win that game. It's kept them in every game this year. And if they can get to the playoffs with most of that defense healthy, it will give any offense they play some issues. 6th is Georgia. I don't feel like I have to justify where Georgia is. I don't believe they can be much higher than this with the body of work they've put forward. A lot of close wins, a close loss to a really good Alabama team. I do not think to this point that they are one of the teams that is in Tier 1, and their placement in Tier 2 is a little bit shaky. But they have Kirby Smart as their head coach. They have a offensive line that's improved from where it was last year, at least in terms of college play. Probably doesn't have the same amount of pros on it. Gunnar Stockton's played well. And C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson have played well at linebacker. This is one of the better teams in America. It's just not Tier 1 as we're used to seeing Georgia. 5th is Texas A&M. Texas A&M is a proud team, a proud program. They've gotten 4 coaches fired this year. That is both an indictment of their SEC schedule, but also a credit to them that they've been able to really emasculate a lot of teams that they have played. So LSU, they emasculated. They really did emasculate Auburn. I know the final score was 16-10, but the 10 points, most of that was really a pick 6. So they dominated, controlled for much of that game. They dominated Florida in that second half. I mean, we're just talking about Georgia. Georgia couldn't do that. So this is one of the best teams in the SEC, one of the best teams in America. I do think that defensively they have some things they need to work through. I sort of view them as a better version of Notre Dame, where I don't quite know if they can win it all this year, and I think they have some permanent issues that can't really be rectified in the regular season or postseason, but their body of work so far is impressive, and the fact they're undefeated and a touchdown favorite over Missouri, they should beat Missouri. I'm impressed with the job Mike Elko's done. He's also a good coach, and my personal coaching ratings factor into this for sure. Oregon at 4th. People will give me pushback for this. I've seen a lot of people, even people I trust, question whether or not Oregon's all that good. I, to a certain degree, understand it, but I also disagree with it respectfully. I believe that Oregon, when you look at the dominance metrics and who they've played, so I know Penn State is no longer anyone to brag about, but I do believe that Penn State in week 5 was dramatically better than they are right now. Healthy Drew Aller, they hadn't quit, for example. I mean, look at the game plan they threw out against Ohio State and against Iowa, for example, where their defense kept doing the same damn thing over and over and over again. The defense didn't even play nearly as well as they did against Oregon, for example. Look at the offense. The offense in that fourth quarter against Oregon was actually creative and had some explosiveness to it against a defense that's rated top 5 in a number of categories. Was not nearly that against Iowa or against Northwestern or against Ohio State, like irrespective of how good those defenses are. And Ohio State and maybe even Iowa too have a better defense than Oregon, but I do credit Oregon as if they beat a top 10 team when they played Penn State. Now, top 5, no. Top 1, number 1, as I thought Penn State was preseason. No, I don't think Oregon beat the number 1 team or even a top 5 team. But a top 10 usual James Franklin team, yes, I credit them with that. And the Indiana win ages more gracefully every day because Indiana continues to dominate everyone and rise in the metrics and continues to, at least for now, seem like they might defy the blue chip ratio. So I don't really penalize them for that. They're not ahead of Alabama or the Big Two, you know who I'm talking about, because those teams have either better wins or they don't have the same type of concerns that I have with Oregon potentially. Oregon's kind of in this Tier 1B category. Alabama on up is Tier 1A. Alabama is third because that game against South Carolina, in my mind, was a little bit, just a little bit concerning, but it's more than that. It's also the idea that their trench play, from what I can tell, is not as good as the two teams ahead of them. And I want to take everything into account. That means I can't totally ignore that Florida State loss. But if they, due to their November slate, Oklahoma and LSU, what they did to their October slate, and Ohio State and Indiana, look the exact same and maybe even slip up somewhere, fail to cover the spread, play someone uncomfortably close, Alabama's argument will be very strong to be number one in power ratings because the caliber of schedule they're facing is tougher than a lot of teams on this list. This isn't even an SEC thing. Their schedule's way tougher than A&M's. It's way tougher than Georgia's. It's tougher than Texas's, even including the Ohio State game. Alabama's played plenty of good, great teams, and they have beaten all of them outside of that week one loss to Florida State. So when I give Alabama praise, it's not an SEC thing, actually. It's more of an Alabama thing. They are the best team in the SEC. That's why they nearly have minus odds to win it, despite the SEC being a much more competitive field at the top than the Big Ten is. The only reason I don't have them at number two, where Indiana is because Indiana's, they're defying the laws of college football. And the only reason I don't have them number one over Ohio State yet is because I want to see how Indiana plays Penn State. And Indiana didn't cross enough rivers, cross enough Rubicons for me to put them at number one yet. They caught up with Ohio State in a variety of metrics. They nearly passed them in FPI. They passed them by more than a point in efficiency. They're catching up to them in opponent-adjusted points or EPA allowed per play. They've passed them in points per play margin with a tougher schedule, which matters. And Indiana, along with Ohio State, are playing with a lower snap count than a lot of these other teams. Ohio State's snap count is much lower than Indiana's, but Indiana has played their backup quarterback in the vast majority of their games, whereas Ohio State has not. And Indiana's defense and offense, too, have played a lot of backups. So Ohio State and Indiana are keeping their players fresh. They have underrated depth. And they also have, I think, some of the best quarterbacks in America. Alabama does too, by the way. So awesome quarterback play is a theme of the top three. Fantastic depth is a theme of the top three. I don't think Indiana is as deep as Alabama or Ohio State, but they've lost some guys to injury and really kind of in a protective way where Surratt maybe could have played against Maryland, but they kept him out to be safe, which is smart. Aiden Fisher, if they really, really needed him, I feel like he could have maybe played, though. That's speculative. It's not me saying I know something. That's just me kind of throwing darts as a blind man. I'm just speculating because of the fact that he seemed ready to go, and Cignetti said that, and then all of a sudden he wasn't against Maryland. They're being safe with keeping their players healthy because of what happened last year, but they're deeper on top of that. And they've gotten their backups plenty of reps in most games in the fourth quarter, rotated them in sometimes in the third quarter. That really helps. So this is my top 10 here, my Week 11 power ratings. Indiana has a really good chance, I think, to move up to number one after this weekend. Alabama has a good chance to claim that number one spot as November goes on. Oregon, I think, could. Really, there are so many teams on this list that could claim that spot, but I have to give it to Ohio State right now. Ohio State, the way they play looks effortless compared to every other team, or at least more effortless than any other team. And while I think Cignetti and Indiana have the best staff because they're defying the rules of college football, the next best coaching job after that in this top 10, outside of probably Utah and Texas Tech, I would say is Ohio State with what they lost and what they brought back and the development they have. They're the best team in America as of today, and they're the best program in America as well. Let me know what you think of my top 10 power ratings in the comment section below. Okay, so a quick intermission here. Don't want to do this, but my dad just called me, so I want to make sure that there's no emergency going on. So thanks for being patient. Okay, guys, I just need to unlock my door to let my dad grab something. Asian Posturine, thank you for becoming a member of the channel, player of the game. Thanks. Really appreciate you joining as a member. Hopefully we can get more members on college football with Sam. Really appreciate that. I know there's not a lot of stuff for members, but I will always give members priority reply in my comments. So if you want to make sure that I have to answer what you have to say with something, signing up as a member is a great way. And I'm trying to find something else to add on to that, but that's really all for right now. That and maybe like a exclusive live show where I answer any questions you have for like 30 minutes to an hour. Um, that's really it as of right now. And early releases, which I haven't been the best about because of organizational stuff. But after tonight's live show, I'm going to cut these clips up as I always do and release them. But some will be released tomorrow morning. Others will be released tonight. If you want to get, all the clips, for example, and also get, you know, early watch privileges for when I release non-live content, becoming a member of the channel is a great way for that. But I need to unlock my door. I'll be right back. We'll resume the show. Thank you for your patience. Sorry about that. But I want to make sure that I'm able to help anyone out when they need to be helped out. Okay, so now that that's all behind us, let's talk about who the best team in the nation is right now. Having a little bit of like heartburn today. I don't know exactly why, but maybe it's the ramen with garlic or whatever that I had. That was really good. It was a really good lunch. Who is the best team in college football, and which teams can contend for that spot, for that privilege, that honor, and also which teams can win it all? Well, I hope that I'll be able to answer this question within this segment. Make sure to leave down below who you think the number one team is in America and how you see it, and who would be grouped within that team. Is there anyone grouped with the number one team? Any competitors for that spot? Or do you think there is an obvious, unanimous national champion favorite, best team in America? I first want to take you to Ohio State. I feel like that is the best place to start because of where they are ranked. So they are number one in the AP poll, number one in the coaches poll. They're receiving the majority of the votes. Ohio State's case for number one for me revolves around quarterback play. So Julian Sain's number one in completion percentage. He has I think 197 flat passer rating, which is insane. If he continues to put up the numbers that he and Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith in that offense are, he could break the passer rating record. I don't know if he will, but that's in contention here. He looks better and more poised every week. And as we already mentioned, they have NFL wide receivers. So Tate and Smith, I think, are number one and number two in NFL draft projections. And that's like talking about Smith as if he were draft eligible this year. He would be one, Tate would be two right now. And I mean, what they are doing is magical. The one-handed catches, how they're able to beat bracket coverage, how they're able to win 3-on-1. It's crazy stuff. Brian Hartline is probably the best position coach of all time for a reason. And that combined with Julian Sayin and his development is a lethal passing offense. Ohio State is a very athletic front six, front seven, depending on which formation, which defense they operate out of. So they can operate out of 4-3, they can operate out of 3-4, they can operate out of 4-2-5. Patricia runs a multiple NFL defense with really the goal of confusing the quarterback first and foremost. And they are filled with Caden McDonald, Caden Curry, Kenyatta Jackson Jr., Tywone Malone, Edric Houston, and then Arvell Reese, Sonny Styles. It is a defensive front that does a very good job of getting pressure with four, that does a good job of stopping the run, I would say particularly up the middle with Caden McDonald and those linebackers and then safety Caleb Downs. It's a mean, nasty defense that you're going to have a hard time moving. Very tough time moving. And that also has to do with Caleb Downs, who is, I still think, college football's best defender. At one point, I was maybe convinced Arvell Reese was. I think a lot of that is that Arvell Reese, being a front seven, front six player that can also be lined up at edge, will make more exciting plays because he's going to be making contact with other players more often. But Downs, I believe, is still college football's best defender. He is college football's best player on defense. I still believe that. And then finally, and this is a very good argument given the history of the blue chip ratio, Ohio State is number one in blue chip ratio. So that, along with being reigning national champions and undefeated, and they're number one in FPI, S&P Plus, second only behind Indiana in points per play margin, this is a team that has a very strong argument to be number one. And they also have an elite coaching staff with a head coach in Ryan Day, who I have a lot of respect for, Matt Patricia, who has done a phenomenal job on defense, and their position coaches are among the best in America. I can say very similar things about the Indiana Hoosiers. Indiana is one of the best stories of college football in recent memory, and they are one of the only teams in the Big Ten that over the past 2 seasons, including this one, has a better conference record than Ohio State does. A lot of that has to do with playing in a much easier 2024 schedule. Let's not get that mistaken. It's similar with Oregon, who also has a better conference record than Ohio State. But the fact that Indiana is even in that conversation with the current number 1 program in football, the Buckeyes, is incredible. Indiana right now has, I think, along with Ohio State, the strongest case to be number 1. It's those two, and then you have a little bit of a drop-off there after these guys. Indiana, their predicament is centered around their elite staff. Mendoza is no longer first in Heisman odds as of this past Saturday, but he's very close. And Indiana's staff, what they're able to do, making 2 and 3 stars into 4 and 5 star caliber players, is incredible. Nothing short of incredible. Their offensive line, their defensive line, it is outside of maybe Oregon, just maybe Oregon, the best amongst this group. How they play in the trenches is nothing short of phenomenal. They're able to bully you with the ground game, or if it's against a better rushing defense, they're able to really keep them honest with that ground attack. They're able to protect the quarterback, not to the degree Ohio State or Alabama can, but good enough to allow Mendoza to do his thing and sit comfortably in the pocket for the most part, and he has the legs to escape if need be. Indiana's O-line, when factoring in pass blocking and run blocking, I think is a non-negotiable, especially in run blocking. They are really able to push anyone forward they want to, with the exception of Iowa. And Iowa's defense this year is profiling as a top 5 unit in metrics, and playing them in Kinnick is tough, to say the least. Tough. It's a very impressive offensive line. I am excited every time I watch it. There is never a moment outside of the occasional right guard, right tackle situation where I wince. It's an incredible unit. And then the defensive front and the defense overall. Look, you have Ohio State's defense, which I think is number 1 in America. If there is any defense that we'll talk about here, minus a healthy Texas defense that can maybe compete for that, it's this Indiana unit. Aiden Fisher is an All-American. Kamara, you wouldn't know it by the stats, but by impact, All-American. Tyreek Tucker could compete for that. And then you got D'Angelo Pons, Lewis Moore. Those are All-American caliber guys. And then Isaiah Jones and Jose Wheeler, Dominique Ratcliffe, Kellen Wyatt before he got injured, and then Stephen Daly, who's now replaced him as the full-time other defensive end, Mario Landino. Phenomenal players on the defensive front. And also in the backfield, want to shout out Jamari Sharp, Amari Farrell, and Devin Boykin. It's an incredible defense that Indiana has, and an incredible team as well. Number 2 in FPI, number 2 in SP+, and number 1 in points per play margin. It is a good day and a good year to be an Indiana Hoosier, and Cignetti has this program and this team flying. If you don't believe that this is one of the best teams in America, keep in mind that sportsbooks especially love the blue chip ratio, because blue chip talent matters. And yet Indiana is plus 470 in odds to win it all, and Ohio State's like plus 220 or plus 230. I mean, they are ahead of everyone but the Buckeyes, and if you take out priors, they're almost unanimously ahead of the Buckeyes in every power rating. Priors are important. That's why I have Ohio State number 1 right now myself. But the longer the season goes on, if this continues, and say especially if this continues in the playoffs, eventually you'll have to throw them out the window at the rate that Indiana is going, where they're dominating, and then they put their backups in the fourth quarter, and their backups look way better than even some of their starters last year. Alabama, I also believe, is an argument to be the best team in America. A lot of this has to do with how the Tide have played a tougher schedule than anyone we've talked about on here, and yet they're top 15 in points per play margin. They're 10th in S&P Plus, which is probably a bit down on them. In FPI, they're 4th. In odds to win it all, they're 3rd. I have some people I trust to actually have them 1st in betting power ratings right now. Their quarterback play, much like Ohio State's and Indiana's, is up there. Simpson has been playing high-level ball. Outside of Ohio State, I think they have the number 2 receiver core. Maybe I'm delusional with that, but Isaiah Horton, Jeremy Bernard, Ryan Williams, great receivers. Not nearly as good as Ohio State's, but no one is, especially at the wide receiver position. Their O-line play, they've been improving every week. I don't think it is, in the grand scheme of things, as impressive as Ohio State's, or I meant to say Indiana's. Ohio State was on my mind because it's similar, I think, to Ohio State's, where the pass blocking usually is elite. Sometimes it can be got, but that's because I don't think any offensive line this year is really this titan that's just unstoppable, for example. It's not as impressive as I think Indiana's. I think Indiana, in terms of coaching and what I've seen from them against certain defenses, is probably the most impressive we'll talk about here. I'd say Oregon's or Alabama's is the highest ceiling. I'd say Ohio State in pass blocking has been the most consistent. Alabama's is close to Ohio State's, I would say. A little bit higher ceiling, but Ohio State's been better in pass blocking, and they've also been better in run blocking. Or maybe Alabama's just played such a tougher strength of schedule that the reason they're having struggles in the ground game is due to, playing Missouri's defensive front, Georgia's defensive front. One thing that Florida State is okay at is stopping the run, for example. Tennessee thought they were too until that Oklahoma game, and then South Carolina has a good defensive line. So, the more I think about it, yeah, their struggles in running the ball probably have to do with their schedule. And on top of that, their linebackers and their secondary with, Keon Sabb, Damani Jackson, Bray Hubbard, Nakai Hill-Green, Deontay Lawson, I think Justin Jefferson, linebacker, or maybe I'm, thinking of someone else who's named that. Their linebackers are incredible. DBs are. They got Tim Keenan up front, Kra Russa, Keon Keeley had a good game against South Carolina. The defense is improving, and the offense with Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb is very impressive. Oregon, people will criticize me, but they are consensus top 3 in a variety of power ratings. FEI, S&P Plus, FPI, efficiency, they're 4th, only behind Texas Tech, Ohio State, and Indiana, and points per play margin, they're 3rd. I think Oregon's one of the best teams in America. I believe due to the combination of their loss and strength of schedule and their quarterback play that they have the weakest argument of the 4 teams we've talked about thus far, including them. But they have something those other teams don't. And I think that is a rushing attack that, when it figures itself out, can probably run for 200 yards on most run defenses that it will face. I know they didn't against Indiana, but I also think they abandoned that run game a little bit too quickly, and Dante Moore taking those sacks, the majority of which were on him, also didn't help. This is a team that could probably turtle up and run it 30 times in a row against some better teams in America and have some offensive success with that. And then with the defense they have, they could play off of that and be able to effectively control games. Their weakness, ironically, is what looked like potentially their biggest strength earlier in the year. That's quarterback. Moore has a lot of talent. He has a good connection with DeCorian Moore and Kenyon Sadiq. His problem is that he is not good in the pocket. Good in a variety of other areas, but he takes sacks. He doesn't get the ball out quickly enough. Those are some things that over the bye, if you're Oregon, especially with Iowa on deck, hopefully you worked on. But their run game, when it's clicking, is potent. The floor of this O-line in run blocking is very high. Their ceiling is even higher. And in pass blocking, they have some issues there, but I don't think it's that much worse than any other team we've talked about. Just unlike Julian Sayin, Mendoza, and Simpson, Moore does not have great or elite, certainly not elite, pocket presence. Oregon's defensive line is very impressive. I don't think people understand how good it is. Yes, Wisconsin was able to run on them a little bit, and that was shocking, but they also started a running back that they hadn't started all season long. And in the second half, Wisconsin really couldn't do anything against that D-line. That D-line did well at times against Indiana's offensive line. It was able to eat up Penn State's offensive line in a way that Ohio State's D-line this past Saturday was able to, and that was on the road and against a Penn State team that hadn't quit yet. Is it this amazing defensive line like Georgia's in 21 or Michigan's in 23? No, I don't think so, but I think that Uyunglele and Tatum Tuioti and many of these younger D tackles one day will be in the NFL. So I have respect for it. And then Brandon Finney Jr. and Jaden Kannady, Dylan Thieneman, that secondary is mean. They have massively upgraded from where they were last year. And on top of that, they have the best quality recruiting classes of the 2024 and 2025 cycle. So their younger players are on paper. Ohio State's younger players are within margin of error for this, and Alabama's too. But on paper, in theory, they have the best group of freshmen and redshirt freshmen. And I think you are seeing that where, Finney and Ife Obadegwu are some of the more impressive cornerbacks nationally. They're true freshman, redshirt freshman. Decorian Moore is already a very impressive wide receiver. True freshman, for example. A lot of their players on defense that are rotating in, even on the defensive line, are redshirt freshmen or second-year players. Very impressive. So I like where Oregon's at. They have some things to work on, yes, but I think a lot of that has to do with quarterback. And Dante Moore has a high enough ceiling, good enough coaching to where I think as the season goes on, Oregon is going to only get better and better. Here are some other teams that have the case to be the best team in America. We'll just go over them really quickly. So I like in college football right now, it's so tough because there are probably some teams, or maybe just a team, but a team nonetheless that I've snubbed from this. But I believe that other teams that can at some point have the case are Georgia, Texas, Texas Tech, and Texas A&M. People will tell me Notre Dame, and that is a team that I may have snubbed, but I think that Notre Dame's secondary is a negative non-negotiable. Like outside of Leonard Moore, and people will show me the USC game, and then I will just show you the Nebraska game, where I think it turns out that Jaden Mayava and that offense on the road against good secondaries may just not be the offense they're cracked up to be. That's kind of what I'm beginning to think now. I mean, when you don't even complete 40% of your throws, and Nebraska's secondary is great, but Michigan's receivers were getting open here and there. So I don't think it's the nation's best secondary, though it's close. I have tremendous respect for it. I think Notre Dame's secondary is a negative non-negotiable, where until proven wrong in the playoffs, I'm not touching them to be the number one team. Next year, different conversation. They should bring the majority of their roster back. I imagine they could make some staff changes. And Carr will be in year 2, and Carr's phenomenal. These other teams, whether it is coaching, that has a lot to do with Kirby Smart, and the talent they have, and the fact that their offense has been able to compensate for that defense of theirs, whether it's Texas, who has shown multiple flashes at different points, but things just haven't yet come together, whether it's Texas Tech. Texas Tech, it's tough. They don't have the depth that a lot of these teams do, but they have just been killing everyone outside of a very inspired and at the time healthy Arizona State team. A lot of that has to do with their trench play. Texas has to do with their pure raw potential and the fact that I think they might be figuring it out with Arch Manning. A&M, they are the one team that may have been snubbed from getting its own dedicated segment. I would just like to see how they do in the rest of their schedule in November. So what do you do against Texas? That's really the game that will tell me a lot. What do you do against Missouri, too, on the road when they get a bye and you get a bye, but it's going to be your third straight road game? What's going to happen there? Those are some other teams that I think can make the case for number one in America. If you disagree and think I'm hating Notre Dame, I'm not. I mean, the Miami loss is not aging particularly well. A&M, I'm not totally sold on yet, and they beat Notre Dame in their house. And Notre Dame's current best win, USC, would be 5-3 if not for a quarterback snapping his leg. So my apologies if I don't think that Notre Dame is this team to be scared of yet. If you are not one of these teams we're discussing, especially the first four I mentioned, then yes, you should be terrified of Notre Dame. But we're talking about who can win it all, who has the best shot at winning it all. We're not talking about even your top 10 teams. We're talking about a very specific bunch of teams that are inside of the top 10. That's it. Now we'll move on to the previews and predictions, the real reason you all are here. Let me see what everyone is saying. Oregon's really going to go 10-2. You don't know that. You do not know that. Max Ellis, number 2 in FBI, number 1 in my heart. We'll see. Who is your secondary team you pull for? For example, I'm an Ohio State fan first, but Gamecocks second. It's tough. As a Michigan fan, that's my number 1 team. Number 2 really rotates for me. That's a good question, Strayer. That's a really good question. The number 2 team I pull for at this point probably has to be Penn State. This has been an evolving thing since 2023, where I was very low on them that year. And then around 2024, I got a little bit higher on them. And then 2025, I really loved the position they were in, what their AD was doing. Of course, I was wrong about them being 16-0 and being the best national champion since 2021 Georgia. I mean, my gosh, why did I go that far? But, you know, you shift your chips in the middle of the table. I was right about Michigan in 23. I was last year wasn't really a good year. What was I right on last year? Last year, I mean, I was, how do I put it? I mean, I was right about Georgia winning the SEC. I guess that was one positive thing to take in. But outside of that, not really much. I was also this year so far I've been right on a lot. So I was right on the fact that Indiana would easily go over their win total and be better than last year. It looks like I might be correct about Michigan going over their win total. I was correct about USC going bowling and being better than they were last year. Correct about Georgia Tech going over their win total. They've already hit that even with their upset loss. Correct about Alabama going to the playoffs. Picked that at 10-2. Picked A&M to go over their win total. Picked Georgia to go over their win total and go to the playoffs when some picked them to miss. Was incorrect about Clemson, Texas, and Penn State. Almost was incorrect about Ohio State, but last minute switched him to win 10 games, and thank goodness I did that. That was probably my best last minute pick of the year. The second team I pull for probably is Penn State. Like, not this year anymore because they're garbage. It's probably best for them that they lose out so that they, like, really get desperate and put all their chips in the middle of the table. But I want them to succeed because I think their fans deserve it more than anything. If we're talking about in general a second team that I pull for, I have no idea. It really does depend. I would probably say I like the idea of Michigan State being successful. I've pretty much picked Michigan State to overperform every year their actual record since 2022. Like, if you solely look at my record predictions over what actually happens, I probably have more of a Michigan State bias than a bias for any other team. People will say I'm a Michigan fan, so I have a Michigan bias, but I picked them to go 7-2 up until this point, and they have. Last year I missed by picking them to make a deep playoff run, but I also thought their program was stronger than it was. I picked them to win it all the year before, and I picked them to do worse than they actually did in 21 and 22. Like, a team that I have constantly predicted to overperform for reasons that at the end of the year kind of look insane is Michigan State. Michigan State probably is that second team that I would pull for based on record. I know I'm rambling on about this, but it is really a loaded question. It depends. Like Indiana right now, I love their story, for example. I'm pulling for them in my heart to win it all. But like I'm not a fan of Indiana. I'm more of a fan of Indiana being as good as they are because that makes me look smarter. But I also like Kurt Signetti, for example. Someone said I pull for anyone who beats OSU. That's actually not true because I was cheering pretty hard for them to beat Tennessee last year, and I preferred that they would beat Notre Dame rather than Notre Dame win it all. So that's not true. Usually I like Ohio State to be really, really good in my heart until they play Michigan, and I've picked them under Ryan Day. I've picked them to go 3-1 against Michigan in the years that Michigan went 4-0 against them. It's pretty well documented based on how I picked them to beat Texas this year. I've picked them to be undefeated until this point, and I have them ranked number 1 right now that I don't have an anti-Ohio State SEC bias. I don't overly praise them, but I don't overly critique them either. I just kind of go with the flow with Ohio State. Like whatever they're doing, I'm doing. I don't really take big risks with predicting them because, yeah, like they're consistent. So I just go with what I think. Yeah, that's really who I pull for. There have actually been, like 2022, I was pulling hard for Ohio State. I wanted Ohio State to win every game by like 50, except for Michigan. A big part of that is I picked them to go 15-0 and win it all. And I wanted to be right about that. That's really the crux of it. Go look at my preseason predictions, and the teams that I'm high on are the teams that I will be pulling for. Usually. With some exceptions. So, an example of that is, I think it would be... There are some exceptions to that. I won't go public with those now that I think about it because I don't want to turn off any fan base. There are some exceptions where like I pick a team to do really well or I rank them really high and you won't know it, but privately I will want that team to lose by 50. But can't do that. You know, this is an objective channel. I try my hardest to be objective, so like I'm not going to pick someone to lose because I want them to lose. I'm gonna tell you why they'll lose or why they'll win, and just go with my objective thoughts. Like, I'll be real with you guys. Like, I wanted Michigan to beat Oklahoma. I wanted them to beat USC, but there was no way I was picking Michigan to win those games. I would have needed a very compelling reason to do so. There wasn't a compelling reason. So I picked Michigan to lose those games, not in the way they did. I thought Michigan would perform better in those games than they did, but I think a lot of people did. Not everyone thought that. Actually, very few people thought that USC would destroy them. they de-pantsed Michigan on live TV. I wanted Michigan State, for example, to beat Minnesota. Thought it would be absolutely hilarious, and wanted Michigan State to earn a win, but I picked Minnesota because I didn't have a compelling reason to pick MSU. And I was right there. So that's how this channel operates. That's how this operates. If you want objective football, if you want to become a better fan and have fun watching games, then this is the place to be. Like no other place. No other place tries its hardest to go against narratives in a way that makes sense. Not to go against narratives for the sake of being against narratives, but we don't do cliches here. And we don't say, oh, well, this team is this because of X, but ignore Y or ignore Z. We don't do that. We also don't do, with rare exception, a whole lot of like yelling and screaming and disagreeing for the sake of disagreeing on here. We don't do that. We don't. I mean, like if we want to do disagreeing for the sake of disagreeing and just get like tons of clickbait and anger everyone, we'd rank Ohio State like 6th and we would rank Notre Dame ahead of them. But we won't do that. We would put Michigan like either outside the top 25 in my power ratings or inside the top 10. They're not. They're somewhere. They're not non-top 25, but they're certainly not top 10 either. So if you want objective, factual analysis and predictions, we won't always get it right, but we hit the nail on the head more often than we bruise our thumb with the hammer. This is the place to be. Number 2, Indiana, travels to Penn State, who is reeling off of a 38-14 drubbing by the Ohio State Buckeyes. This will be a noon kickoff on Fox. Gus Johnson, Joel Klatt on the call. Indiana is emerging from a 55-10 beating of Maryland. They went on the road and they burned that stadium to the ground. It was excited. It was an excited environment early on, but Indiana very quickly just turned on the hose and put that fire out really quickly. This line opened up at Indiana minus 13.5 after being at minus 11.5 last week, and it's grown to 16.5 at some spots. So sharps and early money is all over the Hoosiers there. And I can't blame them. Why would I disagree with that when you look at Indiana's schedule and outside of that Old Dominion game, which was really 27-7, and Indiana left probably 2 to 3 scores off the board there. With Kennesaw State, you beat them by 46. You beat Indiana State by 73. You beat Illinois by 53. You beat Iowa by 7 points outside of that final weird safety where he didn't have to retreat all the way back in the end zone to take that knee. You beat Oregon by 10 on the road. Michigan State, you beat them by 25. You beat UCLA by 50, and you beat Maryland by 45. Penn State is, let's be honest, they are terrible. They are a walking corpse. It's why on defense and offense, they are completely lifeless and don't make adjustments. It's not me making excuses for Kotelnicki and Knowles. They've disappointed this year. But they know that they are either not going to be here next year, or if they are, that this season really doesn't matter, all things considered. They're collecting a paycheck. These players are collecting a paycheck, collecting. In that Ohio State game, they showed brief fight on 1, 2, maybe 3 drives, and then after they got the turnover, but for parts of that first quarter, and then for the fourth quarter, after Ohio State clearly established itself as the far better team, they didn't care. They played like they didn't care. They coached like they didn't care. That's why they called 3 straight screen passes in a row. It's not dissing Ohio State either. It's just reality. It's not Ohio State's fault that James Franklin sucks as a head coach and couldn't put a functional roster and coaching staff together despite having several future NFL players, last year's best defensive coordinator, and an offensive coordinator that led Penn State to have a top 10 offense in efficiency last year and had success at Kansas. It's not Day's fault. It's not David Braun's fault or Kirk Ferentz's fault. They had to play that team, this terrible team, and not the preseason top 5 Penn State team that many, including myself, expected them to be. This Indiana team, it's either them or Ohio State right now when you look at all the metrics and when you look at the strength of record. It's them or the Buckeyes as the number 1 team in America. It also shows up in sportsbooks' odds to win the national championship. For Penn State, my oh my. Preseason, thought they were number 1 was wrong. Now I look at them, and they're top 25 technically in a lot of power ratings, but in reality, they're not even top 30. In their first 4 games, they were a top 10 team, but they weren't top 5. And the evidence I have for that is when you look at their talent profile, their priors, and their staff, combine that with their efficiency metrics through 4 games, they were actually, in their first 2 or 3 games, I think they were top 20 in efficiency metrics, and at one point top 10 there. After the Oregon game, they dipped down to around in between 15 and 20th because they really disappointed, especially offensively. And then UCLA, Northwestern, Iowa, Ohio State, their defense falls apart. Their offense also can't do really much of anything outside of for part of that UCLA game, but that was the second half. That was UCLA wearing down because they don't have depth. And there you have it. Season's over. They're 3-5. They're 0-5 in Big Ten play, still searching for their first conference win. And is it really going to come against this Indiana team when Ohio State plastered you? And if they wanted to run up the score in the fourth quarter, they could have put 2 more or even 3 more deep bombs on your secondary. We'll see. We shall see. It's college football. It's every given Saturday. And especially in this year when the talent is more equal, now more than ever, case in point is Indiana's rise to the forefront of the sport. You never know. You truly never know. But when I look at the rosters here and the staffs, the fact that Terry Smith's done a good job as a leader, but is he an elite game manager like Cignetti is? No. Shanahan has coached circles around Kotelnicki from a play calling and game planning standpoint. Same thing with Bryant Haynes versus Knowles. And I'm someone who, honestly, after seeing how this roster's panned out, and I don't even blame Knowles. I haven't really changed my opinion of him other than the fact that, yes, Ohio State fans were correct in the sense that he wouldn't work out, and in a sense of something that's totally right and not just hating him, they are correct that his defense, if you do not have the ideal personnel, takes a lot of time to integrate with. And Penn State did not have the right personnel, and that's something that I really messed up on. I thought they did. They did not. They had nowhere close to the necessary personnel outside of a few points. So Indiana's the better personnel here. They have the more engaged, superior coaching staff and coordinators. They're motivated, too. And they rested some players against Maryland that I think could be back for this game. As for Penn State, I mean, you didn't totally show up against Ohio State. Even if you did, they probably still would have covered. Because as long as you were engaged, they were trying to kill you, and they successfully did. Are you really going to show up again when you just got beat down and your starters played for all 4 quarters and had that demoralizing finish, and IU got to rest their starters after that third quarter? Really? Really? I just have a hard time with that. For the Nittany Lions, you can pay attention to Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton. I'm curious to see how that offensive line, when it showed some promise in the outside run game against Ohio State, do they try that against Indiana? If they do, does it succeed? Look out for Oliva Vega Ione, Nick Dawkins, Drew Shelton, Nolan Rucci, Anthony Dunco, their offensive line. For Penn State, I'm curious to see Sidney Stewart and Zahir Mathis did some damage to Indiana's tackles early in the game. They made adjustments. The O-line was a little bit dinged up. It will be again this week as Drew Evans is out. Does Chaz Coleman and Dennis Sutton get some pressure and maybe force Mendoza into some mistakes, for example? And what of Zakee Wheatley in the secondary? For Indiana, it's the usual, the entire roster, but especially Fernando Mendoza, Roman Hemby, Elijah Surratt if healthy, Omar Cooper Jr., Carter Smith and Khalil Benson, their tackles. How do they do against Penn State's defensive ends? And then Tyreek Tucker, Michael Kamara, Aiden Fisher if he plays. It sounds like he'll play this week. Isaiah Jones, D'Angelo Pons. Pay attention to them. For the matchup, Indiana is better than Penn State in literally every statistic. It's just, we don't even have to go over it, but for the sake of being excessive, let's do it. So Indiana, Penn State's strength preseason was going to be their O-line and their ability to run the ball. Well, Indiana's played a similar schedule to Penn State. Not quite the same because they haven't played Ohio State and Oregon, but Indiana's at least played Oregon, and they've played a, elite defense or near elite in Iowa on the road. Indiana is averaging 5.7 yards per carry. They have a 48.5 rushing success rate, and their 8.9% havoc rate allowed is only topped by, in the Power 4, Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, USC, and Cincinnati. That's it. And I can tell you their O-line is better than Cincinnati's and USC's. It's also probably better than everyone who is in front of them. But they do not have the skill position talent at receiver that Ohio State or Alabama do, for example. Nor do they have the consistency in run blocking that Oregon does or USC does on the offensive line, I don't believe. Contrast this with Penn State. Penn State allows a 9.5% havoc rate. Their rushing success rate of a 46.7% is good, but they only average 4.9 yards per carry. And through the air, they average 5.88 yards per pass attempt, and they only average 5.38 yards per play. It's pretty porous. And then defensively, Indiana generates an 18.1% havoc rate. Meanwhile, for Penn State, they only generate a 13.1% havoc rate, and they allow a 41.4% rushing success rate and a 40.8% passing success rate. I like Indiana big here. They're going to do what Ohio State did, where they're going to cover, and in the fourth quarter, they'll probably put in their backups and rotate a bit, as Ohio State did in parts outside of, I don't think they rotated quarterback at all, but they usually don't with Sayan. The difference is Indiana is a more consistent rushing offense than Ohio State, so it'll probably look like they run it up in the fourth quarter, whereas Ohio State didn't really do that. That just has to do with the difference of Indiana's rushing offense versus Penn State's. You won't see the same explosive passing plays on this Penn State secondary that I think you saw from Ohio State, though I imagine Indiana will still dice up this Penn State secondary through the air. It'll be ugly. It won't be close, just as it's been with Indiana against anyone not named Iowa on the road or the Oregon Ducks. As for the Big Ten standings, Indiana, they'll just continue to win. They'll be in Indy, most likely against Ohio State. If not, they'll be up against, Michigan or Oregon. A slim chance it could be Iowa or even USC, but pretty sure it's going to be Indy and Ohio State for the Big Ten championship game. And as for Penn State, you are almost guaranteed to finish in the bottom third of the conference. I mean, my, oh my, how the mighty have fallen. But I love Indiana to win and cover big time here. I think it's a huge letdown spot for Penn State and a tough spot for them. Moving on to BYU at Texas Tech, the Red Raiders and the Cougars. Very impressive matchup. Very impressive. And a game that I am looking forward to watching. This is also going to be noon on ABC. Wait, is it ABC? I think it is ABC that is not with YouTube TV. Gosh, I have YouTube TV, and my ESPN plan is limited because I have the ESPN Plus, but not like the unlimited package. So I may not be able to watch this game, and I'm like clenching my fist. That makes me so angry. At least I can watch like Ohio State, Indiana, Michigan, Oregon, because I'm more of a Big Ten guy, even though I cover the entire sport or try to. So at least I can watch my Big Ten teams. But this is... Bless me. This is irritating, to say the least. 8th-ranked BYU travels to play 9th-ranked Texas Tech. We have a top 10 Big 12 matchup on our hands this Saturday, noon Eastern time, 11 a.m. local time on ABC. Texas Tech is 8-1, 5-1 in conference play, and BYU is 8-0, 5-0 in conference play. Tech is the favorite here by 10.5 points. They are the hotter team, given they have put on a good win streak in response to that Arizona State loss. BYU's coming off a bye, though, and that coaching staff is one to not trifle with when they have adequate time to prepare. Look at their resume. Is this a team that I will power rate top 10? Hell no. But is this a team that I would be scared of no matter who I was if I had to play them? With rare exception, as in, the exception of the top teams of the sport. Oh, yeah. I, for context, am a Michigan fan. I would not want to play BYU when they had a bye. Even if they traveled to Ann Arbor, would not want to face that staff. But just, no. Like, thank you, no thank you. Go away. This team has, whether it's close wins over Colorado or a close win over West Virginia, where they were ahead for 14, 21 points for much of the game, but could never pull away beyond that. Close win at Arizona, close win over BYU, close win over Iowa State. They are the close win king. They keep winning. They're the Iowa of the Big 12, and that's a compliment. Much like Iowa, they can run the ball, they have a gutsy mobile QB, and Jay Hill commands an awesome defense for the Cougars. This is their toughest test yet, and thankfully, they got a bye sandwich in between that emotional great win over Iowa State from 2 Saturdays ago before this game to prepare. For Texas Tech, They have had blowout win after blowout win after blowout win. Every game they have played in, they have won by 20 or more points outside of that loss to Arizona State where they nearly came back and won. That was with a backup QB, and Arizona State had their starter in Sam Leavitt healthy. They no longer do, and yet they just won a game with Jeff Sims at quarterback. That's a credit to Kenny Dillingham and his staff. So they lost to one of the best staffs in the Big 12 with, when healthy, one of the better rosters on the road with a backup QB. And they nearly won. This is the number one power-rated team in the Big 12. Doesn't mean we'll pick them to win here. I think that their staff and QB situation can sometimes be their Achilles heel. By staff, I mean their head coach, Joey McGuire. He's done an impressive coaching job this year, but just based on past history, I don't think he's a plus coach. Don't think he's a minus like I did preseason, though. Shieldwood's an amazing DC. Jay Hill's an amazing DC. This is a battle of defensive coordinators, of head coaches, and of rosters. It is going to be a tough physical war between the Cougars and the Red Raiders. This, I would say, outside of maybe Arizona State, and also definitely outside of Utah, because that was a road game, this is their second or third toughest test of the year, but they're not as healthy as they were earlier in the year. And again, BYU is that bye, and they are a nasty team. They're an annoying team for bettors. I know a professional bettor who keeps fading them and just kind of throwing money away at this point. At some point, though, I mean, given trends, if you're extremely successful against the spread, eventually you will not cover. BYU cannot afford that this Saturday, as they are 10.5-point underdogs. Looking at some of the key stats here and players to pay attention to, for the Red Raiders, I would take an interest in these defensive ends. So Romello Height and David Bailey, Jacob Rodriguez, the linebacker behind them. How do they fare? How do they fare against a BYU team that is running the ball like their life depends on it? BYU offensively is a very impressive team in terms of their ground game. I mean, I have been impressed with how they have been able to win close games, in part because, you know, they average 5.7 yards per carry. They have a 0.16 EPA plus EPA per rush attempt. They have a 45.8% success rate, and they're in the top 25 of havoc rate allowed defensively. Great O-line. Barrett Bachmeier's done a phenomenal job as a, I believe, true freshman quarterback. Yes. And then their center, Bruce Mitchell, he commands a great offensive line. So how does Texas Tech's defense, Shieldwood commanding the number one defense in terms of efficiency and in terms of adjusted EPA per play allowed? I still think Ohio State's the number one defense, but the fact they're number one in multiple statistical categories is impressive. How do they handle this BYU offense? As for the Texas Tech offense here, Morton should be healthy. If not, you're going to rely on Mitch Griffiths. Howard Sampson and Jacob Ponton are one of the more impressive tackle duos in America, and they technically both could return next year, along with Sheridan Wilson, their center. Davion Carter, Will Jados, it's one of the best O-lines in the Big 12, that's for sure. And with Coy Eakin and Cameron Dickey, Jacoby Williams, who will both return next year, they're true sophomores. I mean, this is a Texas Tech team who's not just winning for this year, but if they can win the Big 12 this year, reach the playoffs, maybe compete there, even win a game, you're talking about a team next year that is going to return a lot offensively. And then defensively, Ben Roberts, John Curry, Bryce Pollock, Brennan Jordan, A.J. Holmes Jr., and basically their entire two-deep defensively comes back. And they'll probably get transfers too, with the money they have, and they're bringing in some highly touted recruits too. So that offense is going up against a BYU defense that, again, is commanded by Jay Hill, a wonderful defensive coordinator who I have tremendous respect for. Whether it's John Tomopeo or Keanu Tanu-Vasa, their defensive tackles, and behind them they have Justin Kirkland, Anisi Purcell, Viliami Puua. I'm not the best at pronouncing these names, but I think I'm, hopefully, let me know if I'm not doing a okay job. But if I am, Let me know down in the comment section below. Isaiah Glasker, you got Tanner Wall, Therian Alexander III. It's a mean defense. It's clutch. They make the plays when necessary, and they're a good unit overall. What I'm curious to see is that BYU has been winning in close games. Tech has been winning in blowouts. And their only loss is to an Arizona State team on the road who, when they play to their ceiling, they're really, really good. So can BYU have the coaching performance of their life, and is Texas Tech going to show up without playing an inspired effort? My answer to that is no. That's not very realistic. So I believe outside of staff, everything goes Tech's way. The pass defense, the run defense, the pass offense, the rush offense, and the overall team. I think BYU is a better staff, or at least their head coach is better than Texas Tech's head coach. But in this instance, that won't be enough. I like Tech big here. I like them to come out and be angry. They know this is going to be nationally televised. It's a top 10 game. Everyone will be paying attention to it. They will want to show out, and they will want to dominate. And I think they will. I think that, like with Iowa, when you play a team where the roster's better than yours and you're on the road, it's a bad combo. Bad combo. I've seen Iowa, they have a chance against Michigan in the Big Ten title game. They play it close. Michigan shuts them out or wins by 40. Maybe they have a chance to play it close with Ohio State on the road. No. Maybe Penn State. No. On the road, they beat them this year. But you get the point. I don't hate BYU. I actually think it's cool that they're 8-0. And I think that they will win some more games than this one. But Texas Tech's the dominant player in the Big 12 right now. And I think they're going to win and cover and show that they are the dominant player. As for standings in the Big 12, Tech needs this win because they get a win here and they're firmly back in that lock to be in the Big 12 title game as long as they don't lose another game. If they go 11-1, they're in the Big 12 title game. It just depends on who they'll play. As for BYU, a win here knocks Tech down. They're probably out of the Big 12 title game picture, at least for the moment. And BYU probably would be pretty close to a lock. They could probably then afford a loss, and they'd get in at 11-1 with that win over Texas Tech. But fortunately for Texas Tech, I like them to win and cover here. I say fortunately as if that means I'll be correct. We'll see on that. We may not be correct. BYU would be favored over Michigan, by the way. According to FPI, yes. Again, I would not like to see BYU if they played Michigan. If Michigan played Texas Tech, that would be a bloodbath, especially given Michigan's current injury situation. I am actually going to make a video. So I made a video about why Ohio State's hated by the SEC. That's gotten like 16,000 views. So thank you guys for pumping that up. It's true. The SEC is this bias against Ohio State that just, I don't understand quite. But they also have this bias. More recently, it's been showed towards Indiana because they at least think Ohio State, hey, they have recruiting talent. So they respect that. They don't respect Indiana at all. So I'm going to make a video about like, hey, Ohio State has been disrespected. Indiana's being disrespected too by the SEC. And that's not me saying I think Indiana or Ohio State are invincible. There's been some Indiana fans and some Ohio State fans that are like, yeah, our teams are going 16-0. Like, hold your horses and pump your brakes here for a minute. Acting as if Indiana didn't nearly lose to Iowa or could have lost to Oregon, or that Ohio State wasn't in a dogfight with Washington for a half, and Washington really struggles with scaling against good teams, or that you weren't in a dogfight with Texas. Like, yes, I think you're the two best teams. I think one of you is going to win it all. I had T-Cal on the show the other day, and he's the definition of a ball knower. He thinks that too. But no one's invincible this year. No one is 2024 Ohio State yet. And 2024 Ohio State was like nowhere close to the average Saban team. Same with 2023 Michigan. Same with 2022 Georgia. They were not anywhere close to the average Saban team. And no one is near those teams right now. No one. In fact, I will say mostly because of talent, if Indiana goes 16-0, I would still view them as one of the weaker national champions in recent memory. It would be the best coached team in recent memory, because to win with that on paper talent, which does matter, would be phenomenal. And they would be better than a lot of teams that came before them, even in the pre-portal era, but they would be one of the weaker national champions of the 21st century, even if they go 16-0 and win those postseason games, because of how the sport's flattened, because of how there just isn't the same depth that there used to be. And also because of limited possessions. And what limited possessions does is limited possessions helps your depth not be exposed. If any of these teams played in 2011 or 12 against Alabama with those clock rules and that depth, they would lose by 20 plus. It would not be competitive. It would not be competitive. It just wouldn't. So anyone who says they have a GOAT caliber team this year, you're insane. You need your head examined. Anyone. And that doesn't just go for anyone but Ohio State. It goes for Ohio State too. And I have Ohio State at number 1. Love the job they've done. It's a very impressive coaching job by day. But hold your horses, everyone. I mean, I understand we like to talk a big game. I talked a big game with PSU preseason, but I very quickly course corrected. Yeah. You're taking BYU by 4 in this one, Bull. That is interesting. And yes, Bull, thank you. That is why Saban left. Saban could no longer field GOAT teams. It was going to be nearly impossible to field the teams of the 2010s and even 2000s that many put together. That was going to be nearly impossible to do. And that frustrated him. So that combined with him being older and not being able to promise assistants that he'd be around for a while, I respect why he left. It's not that the game passed him by. I still think he'd have success in the current game, but things just were no longer how he wanted to do it. So he's already the greatest of all time. You don't need to cement your legacy more. Why not just retire? That's what happened. Third-ranked Texas A&M. They're undefeated. They're coming off a bye, and they're traveling to a Missouri team that's reeling from quarterback injuries, but as a maverick, a wizard of a head coach in Eli Drinkwitz, and he has a bye too. This will be Texas A&M's third straight road game. This will be Missouri's first home game in over 2 weeks. You had that, bye, then the road game against Vanderbilt where they unfortunately had both of their quarterbacks go out due to injury. This will be a 3:30 p.m. game on ABC. Missouri top 20 ranked 6-2, 2-2. Do not think they're one of these teams that is overvalued. I think if healthy, 19th would be too low, but unfortunately they are banged up. A&M, third ranked, 8-0, 5-0 in SEC play. They're favored by 7.5 points. What a job by Mike Elko this year. Phenomenal coaching job. And also I think a good coaching job by Drinkwitz. And if Drinkwitz is able to win this game, we're talking about someone who should be competing for the SEC Coach of the Year award. This A&M team has had some issues on defense throughout the year, but that win over Notre Dame is a signature win. They got Brian Kelly fired and set Tiger Stadium on fire, got Billy Napier fired, were able to pull away from Mississippi State. This is a team that really in the second half just turns it on. I was just finishing up kind of a rant that I had about how no team that wins it all this year is going to even come close to the teams of the past 10 years and even to a lesser degree the previous 5. But Texas A&M, to a little bit of a degree, reminds me of a Walmart 2022 Michigan, where you're close with everyone in the first half. You're not, at least as of right now, the best team in America, but you're one of the best. And you can end up being the best at the end of the year. And in that second half, you just turn the knob, you turn up the volume, and your opponent's ears start bleeding, and they can't handle it. But you can. So you beat them. And you, in some cases, you just destroy them, as you did LSU, and as you did Mississippi State and Florida specifically in that second half. And you beat a tough physical Notre Dame team on the road. For Missouri, had a very easy beneficial schedule that they took advantage of. And they nearly beat Alabama, I think showed how legitimate they were. They were able to survive Auburn on the road, which with how Missouri plays and with Auburn's defense, it's the only defense, along with Ohio State's and Indiana's, that has not allowed more than 24 points this year. And Auburn doesn't have an offense to go with that. So you played one of the best defenses in America. Were able to come out with an overtime win. And then the Vanderbilt game, if Pribula's healthy, I don't know, maybe you do win. But Vandy had you dead to rights with efficiency stuff and the big plays. Another close loss. Missouri is 1-2 in close games. If you want to include just single-digit margins of victory, then they're 2-2, including that South Carolina win. This is going to be their second toughest test behind Alabama, because I do think A&M is a significantly better team than Vanderbilt. They may not match up as well against Missouri in theory that Vandy did, but A&M is ranked third for a reason. They're 8-0 for a reason, and you still have games at Oklahoma and then at Arkansas. It's a tough stretch in November for Missouri. But if anyone can overcome adversity, if anyone can utilize their roster, have it punch above its weight class, I believe that is Eli Drinkwitz. Genuinely believe that. He is one of the better coaches in the SEC, one of the better coaches in college football. So let's talk about the roster that Missouri and A&M have here. For the Tigers, pay attention to Ahmad Hardy and Kevin Coleman Jr. and Keegan Trust on offense, and Caden Green. They have a wonderful offensive line. Hardy is a wonderful running back. Kevin Coleman Jr. has been an effective wide receiver. They are starting a very young, new, very green quarterback that I don't think they ever expected to play this year. That is going to be very difficult for Missouri to do. They're going to. I mean, the quarterback they're going to be starting isn't even listed on the depth chart by our lads. It just isn't. It shows Bo Pribula and Matt Zollers, and Zollers was a true freshman, so I don't know who they're going to be playing at QB. But the line is 7.5 and not 14.5 for a reason, because outside of some of the offensive weapons they have, Chris McClellan, Damon Wilson, and Zion Young, that is one of the better defensive fronts, not just in the SEC, but in the land. They get pressure. They stop the run. Josiah Trotter has been an incredible linebacker for them. They have really put things together on defense, and Corey Batoon has manned a great offense, and great defense, and Kirby Moore has manned a great offense. Drinkwitz's staff is one of the better staffs in the SEC and in the nation. For A&M, preseason, I actually had this staff, I believe, third in the SEC, just behind Georgia and Texas. And for a brief moment there, I actually picked them to go 10-2 and go to the playoffs. Then I went off of it. For the sake of getting Florida an extra win. Why did I do that? I mean, I have a video on it. It's on record that I at least had them flirting with the playoffs. I was higher on them than most were. Picked them to go over their win total pretty comfortably. Thought 7.5 was way too low. And they did. I mean, they already have. They're 8-0. Even if they lose out, they're over their preseason win total of 7.5. But if only I stuck to that 10-2 prediction. Gosh. Marcel Reed, Mario Craver, Casey Conception, Trey Zunn III, Demetrius Crownover. They have a complete offense led by Colin Klein. And then defensively, Cassius Howell is 9.5 sacks. I actually think it's 10.5 now. You got Tareen York, Scooby Williams, Marcus Ratcliffe, Will Lee III. They have a wonderful operation at A&M. And I will tell you, I believe this game will come down to whether or not Marcel Reed can make those throws. By those throws, you know what I'm talking about. Those NFL throws, those throws on 3rd and long. Can he stay safe with the football? And it also comes down to A&M's defense. You know, Missouri's going to be running a pretty one-dimensional attack. I would expect them to. Can you stop their ground game? Can you? Because they've had some issues this year. Texas A&M has. I mean, Texas A&M is 4th in adjusted EPA per play with a plus 0.24. Their success rate margin, yards per play, and EPA per play, however, are underwhelming compared to the rest of the teams surrounding them. And defensively, look, A&M's defense has done well, but they're allowing 5.5 yards per carry. They allow explosive runs. They have a good success rate against the run, but they allow some explosives here and there. It's a defense that's incomplete. So it's really an A&M game. If A&M shows up, they're definitely going to win. But if they have some issues, which they have shown throughout the year, and Missouri's able to exploit some things, the Tigers can certainly win. I'm not going to pick that to happen, though. I do think that A&M offensively will really kind of struggle in that first half. They'll do what they always do. First half, you are trailing at the half, or you're tied, or it's very uncomfortable. And second half, because they have offense and a capable QB, and it's not this kind of last-minute thing, although at least Missouri has a bye, they'll pull away, and they'll win. Staffs are pretty equal. Overall team goes to A&M, and A&M's edges on defense are much larger than Missouri's edges on defense. I'm pretty comfortable picking A&M to win and cover in this 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, 2:30 p.m. local time for both of these teams, as both are in the Central Time Zone in this SEC battle. As for the SEC standings, if Missouri wants to go to the playoffs, this is a must-win. They're technically still in the fight for that, but I think that Drinkwitz and the staff knows it's going to take a lot of effort. For A&M, if they lose here, then welcome Georgia, Ole Miss, and potentially Texas for that conversation in Atlanta, especially given how A&M's regular season schedule has gotten weaker and weaker as time's gone on. But if they win here, I mean, it'll come down to that Texas game, and a win here likely puts A&M in a guaranteed spot to get a home playoff game, which would be pretty incredible given Mike Elko's in year 2 and the history of A&M within the SEC struggling with Kevin Sumlin and Jimbo Fisher to reach anything of significance. Speaking of struggling to reach anything of significance, we give you Brian Kelly's ex-team. Man, the stories from Josh Pate about how he handled that tenure, shame on him. Shame on him. Shame on him. Yeah. So bad. Yup, I agree with you, Bull. A&M will cover. If they don't, that will given Missouri's injuries, I think that would be quite concerning. I'm not totally sold on them yet. I still think Alabama's a better team, but I have them as the second best team in the SEC right now. So that, I think, would count as the class of the SEC, the cream of the crop. LSU, coming off of firing Brian Kelly in a bye week to get their new coaching staff situated, is traveling to 4th-ranked Alabama, who's undefeated in the SEC, riding a 7-game win streak ever since that weird and inexplicable loss to Florida State on the road. This is a 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time game on ABC. It's a rivalry spot between the Tigers of LSU and the Crimson Tide of Alabama. Let's check out LSU and tell a story for them before getting to the Tide. At the time, I thought that the win over Clemson was going to be huge and propel this team to go, 10-2, maybe 11-1. Never really thought they'd go undefeated or that they were a national championship caliber team. But preseason, I actually had LSU firing Kelly midseason. I did. I had them going 7-5 at different points. Eventually, I think I came off of that, but I had them still going 8-4, 9-3, not reaching the playoffs. And yeah, I mean, talk about this that we're seeing here. Actually, I didn't have them go 9-3. I had them go 8-4. And if they went 8-4, Kelly would have been fired. So talk about here and now. Clemson's horrible. Florida is a corpse. They're probably better now than they were under Napier, honestly, because now they actually have a real offensive play caller. South Carolina's a walking zombie. I don't even know if... Are they alive? Is their zombie self even capable of getting up, or is he just kind of like one of those torso zombies? And then Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, and A&M are the only good teams they played, and I think LSU showed they were a good team by competing with Vandy and Ole Miss. but they were not a great team, and they needed to be a great team to keep Kelly. And when you lose 49-25 to A&M at home and your stands are empty in the fourth quarter, you're not going to survive at LSU, nor should you. LSU deserved better than Kelly. I imagine they're going to upgrade from him. I'm confident more than anything that Florida, Penn State, and LSU will all upgrade from where they were this year, and probably in the long run too, compared to where they were. Now, they were not exactly in a position to win it all under their current regime, so I'm not saying they will win it all with their future regimes, but I think their odds will be better. This game against Alabama is going to be a tough one, though. The good news is they fired the coach entering the bye, which I think is usually the right move to do, and you get that interim coach boost, especially in a rivalry spot. For Alabama, they have a bye. They were riding since the bye after the Wisconsin game until this game, they were riding a win streak where they beat 4 top 20 teams in a row. All of them are still top 20 in power ratings, by the way. And then they had that close scare against South Carolina that really was unimpressive, but at least they won and didn't lose. Now they get LSU at home, Oklahoma at home, Eastern Illinois at home, and then Auburn is a road game, but Auburn just fired their head coach. So in their November stretch, which preseason I thought would not be extremely tough, but at least, give them some fight, they're going to be playing 2 teams with fired head coaches. So it's not going to be the same stretch that it was in October. I'd expect Alabama, if they play to their ceiling, to go 11-1 through this stretch. But are there any concerns for the Crimson Tide? It's a rivalry spot. They're favored by 10.5, 11.5 maybe. Maybe at some places it's even higher than that. I imagine that people are on Alabama here. Though I also know that some are definitely with the interim coaching boost and some of Alabama's roster stuff and LSU's matchups that some could be on LSU too. LSU's defense is ridiculously good, especially at getting to the quarterback and especially at secondary. That matches up well with, I believe, what Alabama wants to do. And then offensively, it's a really bad matchup for LSU. I mean, if you're going to beat Alabama, you do it by running the ball and having a mobile QB. LSU's a statue at QB, and they cannot run the ball to save their life. They're a pass-first offense, and they're not even really good at that because their O-line can't protect. That is a bad matchup. If LSU is going to win here, it is because their defense will put Alabama in a hole in a similar way that South Carolina's defense was able to. But they'll have to probably do better than that given the offense they have. Though, South Carolina just fired their OC, and they were able to put up some offense against the Tide. So we'll see about that. For LSU, pay attention to Garrett Nussmeier, Aaron Anderson, and the star tight end who might be the best player on that offense, Trades Green. AJ Halsey, DJ Pickett, and Mansour Delane are players to pay attention to on defense for them. And also look out for Weeks. I imagine he'll be back here after missing Vanderbilt and A&M. And West Weeks and Harold Perkins. Look out for them too. For the Tide, it'll be the Ty Simpson, Jeremy Bernard, Ryan Williams, and Caden Proctor show. How do they do against this vaunted Blake Baker LSU defense? And for their defense, Deontay Lawson, Bray Hubbard, Keon Sabb, Tim Keenan III. This 4-2-5 swarm defense that Keen Womack commands. They got to the quarterback effectively against Tennessee. They were able to stymie Georgia, especially early on. What will be their plan of attack against an LSU offense that has some weapons, but ultimately is pretty one-dimensional? I am not going to lie when I say that I'm a little bit concerned for Alabama here. Coming off of the bye, it's a rivalry game. You get the interim head coach boost if you're LSU. And I think this defense matches up very well with you and what you want to provide. It matches up phenomenally, I think. And it's not like Alabama has phenomenal special teams either. LSU beats them at kicker. So if this becomes a game where it's all about field position, I think that can benefit LSU. And maybe they figure out the run game a little bit now that their offensive coordinator, Joe Sloan, is, fired. Maybe they get a boost from that because that side of the ball was clearly poorly coached. At the end of the day, however, I think that outside of run defense for LSU, Alabama either has a slight edge or a big edge in all the other categories. Yes, that includes LSU's pass defense. Alabama will do a good enough job protecting Simpson, and they're deep enough at receiver to where I think as the game goes on, as A&M showed a little bit, as Ole Miss was able to show, they'll be able to get some wins, and that will be enough to open up this LSU defense as the game goes on. It'll be hard fought. I think this game will be tied, basically at halftime, and it'll be close in the third quarter. But late third quarter and the fourth, Alabama's going to pull away, and 10.5 isn't large enough for when they do pull away. So I think Alabama will win this game by anywhere from, I would say, 13 to 17 points is what I'm thinking. Not much more than that. It will not be a blowout, but Alabama will win, and Alabama will cover late. This will help the Crimson Tide on their quest to go to the SEC championship game after missing it last year, and also help them lock up their spot in the college football playoff as they, well, missed that last year, as all of us know. For LSU, you're fighting for pride here. You're fighting for your new staff, your new head coach. You're fighting for the future of Louisiana State University. You're fighting for LSU. If you win this game, well, you're not going to go to the playoffs probably. You're not going to go to the SEC title game, but a win's a win. This team will be remembered, and this will probably help the players rally around their university. And, LSU is one of those few places still, even post-NIL and transfer portal, where the kids and the men commit there, and they play there, and they coach there because of that LSU logo and because of that L for Louisiana. That's why. So LSU will make it tough. They'll fight hard, but it won't be enough to prevent Alabama from eventually pulling away. Now we get to discuss Nebraska and UCLA. Nebraska travels to UCLA to play a 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. Central Time, Nebraska time, and 6 p.m. local time game on Fox. The Bruins are favored by 2.5 points. I was so intrigued by that line when it came out initially. It was like late Saturday night, early Sunday. I thought, I assume they're not expecting Raiola to play here. And the news comes out later that day, tragically, that Raiola's done for the year. Broken fibula. It sucks. This is a prime opportunity, though, for Nebraska, who's reached bowl eligibility. You're not going to miss a bowl game. That bowl streak is now slowly coming together. Matt Rule's gained credibility. You have a tremendous opportunity, if you're the Cornhuskers here, to play aggressive, to not play it safe, to sell out in all your remaining games, and show the world what you have behind the man. Because Dylan Raiola is your, number one most impactful player by a mile. What do you have behind him? You will show the world what this Saturday. I'm happy it's a little bit of a later kickoff. That means I'll get to, be up until midnight watching this game. I'll have a complete day of entertaining football. And the Cornhuskers, they have a good win over Cincinnati. They played a Michigan team who's 7-2 competitively. They played a USC team who's 6-2 competitively. Minnesota's not all that good, but at least, they're going bowling, so that loss isn't the worst thing in the world. Although it kind of is. Yikes. That 6-24 loss where Minnesota set their program record of sacks in a game with NFL-like clock rules is pretty humiliating. But this is a 6-3, 3-3 team in the Big Ten we're talking about here. And a team that is less than a field goal underdog to UCLA. They'll have a chance against Penn State because Penn State's a corpse, and they'll have a chance against Iowa because it's a rivalry game at home. This team, as slim as the odds are, can go 9-3. They can also go 6-6 or anything in between. They have nothing to lose here. They've already gone bowling. There's no reason for them to be tight in their rear. They got to sell out here. And it's the same thing for the UCLA Bruins. This is why I love this game here. UCLA is 3-5, but they still have a winning record in the Big Ten with a 3-2 Big Ten record. They host Nebraska, where they are favored to win. If they win, well, they got 4 Big Ten wins, 4 wins overall. Then, you travel to Ohio State. You're not going to win that game. It's a night game in Columbus, and Ohio State's that good. You're not going to beat them. The best you can hope for is you'll do what the Citadel did with Alabama in 2018. You'll play it close to the half, and Ohio State fans will be calling for their entire coaching staff to dunk themselves in boiling oil and then they'll pull away and win by 40 in the second half. I mean, that's the best case scenario for UCLA. But for Washington at home, especially when they play Oregon the following weekend, it could be a look-ahead spot for the Huskies. You could win that game. And then USC on the road, USC's pretty thin. They'll be a little bit more beat down in the final weekend. It's a rivalry game. They have a shot to go bowling here. And this is going to be the only game I think they're favored in the rest of the way. So if you're going to win, you got to win, like here and now. So they also have nothing to lose, and they're coming off a bye. So it's time to sell out if you're the Bruins and you're the Cornhuskers. That's what you love about college football. I know both these teams aren't in the playoff picture, but I am going to be glued in because this will tell us something about the future of these teams. Tim Skipper, with a win here, has to be UCLA's coach next year. And he has the buy-in of the locker room, of his staff, and of Nico Iamaleava, who's actually played quite well after the firing of Deshaun Foster. For Nebraska, a lot of this team returns next year. Let's spend a minute on that, talking about that. That's actually quite fascinating, a little bit last minute, looking up the depth chart here. Didn't want to talk about that because I didn't think about it. But now that I am, let me think about it. So Isaiah Hunter's a redshirt sophomore. He'll come back. Ja'Cory Barney's a sophomore. He returns. Their entire two-deep wide receiver room returns. Elijah Pritchett should be back next year. Gunnar Gatula will be back. Same with Justin Evans. Much of their backup O-line minus Prohaska and Corcoran, who at this point are not going to get better than they are. Luke Lindenmeyer will be back next year. Same with Carter Nelson. Dylan Raiola will be back. TJ Lateef will be back. Emmett Johnson's a redshirt junior. He could go off to the NFL, but he could also come back. Would love to see him come back. And same with the rest of the running back room unless they portal out. Defensively, Keanu Davis, Cameron Lenhart, Vincent Savers Jr., Andrew Marshall, and yeah, they will be back. And then you also have their two-deep, all of their two-deep, except for Marquise Watson Trent, will come back. And I imagine they'll be active in the portal. Kicker Kyle Cunanan, who's been successful for them, and punter Archie Wilson, who's also been successful, they'll come back too. So this Nebraska team profiles as being probably a much better team next year than this year, especially when you factor in the injury and how the trench play was just preposterously awful. And then for UCLA, I can't imagine they'll be worse next year than this year, considering all they lost from last year to this year and how the season started off. TJ Lateef, pay attention to him. He's clearly not one of Nebraska's best players, and usually we only highlight the best for these key players. But since this will be his first true start, and they'll actually have a game plan for him this time, I'm curious to see how he plays in this game. Is he as limited as he looked against USC? Or can he do some things? I'm curious. For Nebraska, Emmett Johnson, Dane Keene, Isaiah Hunter, pay attention to them. And then defensively, it's all about their secondary. Sear Wright, Andrew Marshall, Deshaun Singleton. Look out for them. For the Bruins, Nico Iamaleava, and then their two backs, Javion Thomas and Jalen Berger. Pay attention to them, and center Sam Yoon. And defensively, it's about defensive tackle Gary Smith, safety Cole Martin, and cornerback Roderick Pleasant. This is a team with UCLA that has some talent, athleticism. They have some fight to them. Their rushing offense is absolutely phenomenal. I believe, personally, that Nebraska is the better team here, even with TJ Lateef. And I do think they are better coached and deeper than the Bruins. I'm not going to lie when I say that. And unfortunately for UCLA, you have a talent disadvantage here. Teams have slowly figured you out as the season's gone on. It's just, and look, you have Nico in that passing offense, which is very questionable, going up against one of the better secondaries in America. It's going to be a rough spot, and Nebraska also has the better special teams. So there's a lot going against UCLA here, and not as much outside of the circumstances, the travel and the emotional loss going against the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I say that with a big however, and a pretty big curveball here. You have a true freshman quarterback who's a developmental piece going on the road with a team that has shown to be competently coached coming off a bye. And UCLA's run defense is good. Their rush offense is really good when it's not matched up against an elite run defense. So Indiana was able to pigeonhole them because no one can run on Indiana. It's very much like what Indiana does defensively is a lot like Texas and Michigan and like the Ohio State defense under Jim Knowles late in 2024. Patricia, he'll let you run the ball if, as long as you don't get in the end zone. It's very much like those defenses where running on you is impossible, pretty much, with rare exception. UCLA was incapable of running on IU. Nebraska is... This is Nebraska's run defense. Welcome to my house. Please rob me and take my food. That's Nebraska's run defense. It's not it's not a MAC run defense, but it's not a Big Ten run defense. And with the travel and all these different things, and the fact that I think Nebraska's better coached, but not by this wide margin as if it were Deshaun Foster. Tim Skipper, I think, will utilize the bye, and UCLA will put together enough offense to, at some point, if they maintain a lead, if they get a lead, if they are able to dictate the pace of play. I don't know how Nebraska takes a lead without a flukish play. And that's kind of where I'm hedging my bets here. Like, Nebraska should win. Because I'm a fan of good football, and also because Husker fans are wonderful to me, I kind of want Nebraska to win here. Also for the story. To lose your starting quarterback and then to win and respond in this way would be so cool. It'd be the epitome of football, the epitome of old school Nebraska football, responding to adversity. But there's also that reality where Nico is prone to turning it over, but Latif is probably more so prone to turn it over given the location and the magnitude of this game. And you win the Big Ten with the trenches. And UCLA is the better trenches here. So I have to roll with UCLA and pick them to win, and because it's such a short line, I'm picking them to cover too. UCLA is actually ahead of Nebraska in Big Ten standings. A win here, and between Northwestern and Washington and what they play, there's a chance they could climb up into the top half of the Big Ten standings. Nebraska wins here, and you improve on your regular season win total compared to last year. And if they win this game and don't win anything else, like 7-5 regular season for Nebraska, given the QB injury, I think would be a success. Wouldn't be the best thing in the world, but given the circumstance, if you can win on the road in a tough spot after an emotional loss with your backup QB who's not ready to play, that would be that'd be a wonderful coaching performance. That'd be a coaching performance of the week for sure. Rooting for it to happen. Hope it does. Just, I think the odds say it's more likely UCLA wins and covers. And what a story that would be for the Bruins, Nico Iamaleava, and that team. Been through so much adversity, both these teams have. Final preview. And then we get to Brian Hartline, Penn State. Wanted to get to that last week, but couldn't. And then also get to the LSU coaching search. Most of these videos will be out tonight. But some of them will be out tomorrow. Like the non-previews will be out tomorrow. With maybe an exception. I imagine, like, now that I think about it, more of these videos will probably be out tomorrow. Like at least half and half is where I'm going. Nice cameo by Sam. Georgia's really the only good team. The rest are meh. I think FanDuel has Alabama -1.5, Alabama in a neutral site right now. That would make sense because in all the power ratings, they're ahead of Alabama by quite a bit. If you took priors away from every team, I'm pretty sure Indiana would be ahead of Ohio State by probably a field goal now. Like, without priors, IU is in its own tier. But priors are important. With priors, Ohio State and IU are neck and neck. Then you drop a little bit, and it's probably Alabama and Oregon. And then you drop a bit again, is what I'm kind of thinking with priors. Never liked LSU after they fired Les Miles. That's a funny comment. 6th-ranked Oregon travels to Iowa. Weird things happen in Kinnick. Oregon is a team that I love because I love good football. So if you are a fan of good football like I am, regardless of whether it is the new kid on the block, the old kid who's always been there, the old money, the new money, you love watching Oregon, Ohio State, Indiana, Alabama, Texas A&M, Georgia, Texas Tech. Not all those teams are equal, for example, but they are all top 10 teams. They are all operating at an efficiency that is different from 90%, 95% of the sport. You love watching those teams. I love watching them. It is beautiful seeing Julian Sayin hit a deep pass over 3 people to Jeremiah Smith or Carnell Tate. It is beautiful watching Oregon unfortunately keep their quarterback out due to a bad bloody nose, and they run the football for what felt like 40 times in a row against Wisconsin, and they destroy them. It was beautiful watching Indiana de-pants Illinois, and then also back that up by beating Iowa and Oregon, both these teams. Beautiful watching Alabama rebound after Florida State, and A&M go undefeated, and Texas Tech hit on all their portal additions. You get the point. I do not have a pick for this game, and we'll come out and say that right now. And that is because I am really conflicted, because I love both of these teams. And that's not from a rooting or partisan angle. This is from a matchup angle, a football angle. This will be a 3:30 p.m. game this Saturday on CBS. And if you are watching this live or you watch it right when I release it, tomorrow I will have a pick for this game. Hopefully earlier than later. I will release a preview and prediction for that then. So stay tuned. Make sure you've hit the bell for that. Oregon's only favored by 5.5. The line opened up at 6.5. The trend seems to tell me that the Sharps are leaning Iowa, but there's division. And I have respect for Ferentz, old money, Dan Lanning, new money. And these teams, despite that, have a lot of similarities. They have a ton of similarities, and I want to get to that. What do you think of when you think of Oregon? Do you think of finesse? Do you think of Chip Kelly? Do you think of Marcus Mariota, that historic season that he had? Do you think of Pac-12 team? What do you think of when you think of Oregon? Because when I think of Oregon, I think of a team that is among the nation's best, that's competing for a title, that should, at the end of the day, be one of the best teams in America. And that is not all that finesse at all. They are, in terms of the top teams, probably the least finesse because of some of the struggles they've had at quarterback and their lack of depth at wide receiver. They are a physical bowling ball. Now, I don't believe that they are closer to Kirby Smart's Georgia than Chip Kelly's Oregon. Not yet. Huge part of that has to do with the portal. From a roster perspective, I think Lanning is getting there. By portal, I mean you can't build the same depth you did. Like, Kirby Smart himself probably won't field another team even close to 2021 Georgia, for example. But Oregon's recruiting and development is phenomenal. What do you think of when you think of Iowa? Do you think of a team that has no offense, that's all defense, that's really fake, that benefited from the Big Ten West, and only that isn't actually all that well coached? When I think of Iowa, I do think of elite special teams and defense, but I also think of Mark Gronowski and a gutsy, effective quarterback, a wonderful offensive line, and a revived offense that isn't good, but isn't terrible. It's just average. And I think that's all they'll need to win this game. Looking at Oregon's schedule here brings up some intrigue from me and from other college football fans, analysts, experts, whatever you want to call me, or the college football people I'm talking about. Oregon's ranked 6th. Oregon has that win over Penn State that hasn't aged well at all. Penn State's now 3-5. They have blowout wins over Oklahoma State, Oregon State, Northwestern, Montana State, and over Rutgers. Against Wisconsin, Northwestern, Indiana, and Penn State, they showed that they are not perfect, but they also showed that I think on that average basis, they are one of the nation's better teams. It's why they are unanimously ranked top 3 in FPI, FEI, S&P Plus, and they're top 4 in ESPN's efficiency. And they are second in opponent-adjusted EPA per play margin. crazy, honestly. I mean, this is one of the few teams I think that may have genuinely matched or improved upon their 2024 self. Now, you also have Ohio State, but I also think that last year's Ohio State team at the end of the year was probably double digits better on a neutral field than that Oregon team was. Now, I think Ohio State's more like a field goal better than this Oregon team neutral field, which, believe me, Indiana wouldn't be favored by more than that over Oregon neutral field either. Like, that's not how spreads work. Oregon was a very lucky team last year that created some of their own luck, that benefited from some lucky balls. They were much closer to 2022 TCU or even a Walmart version of that than they were to a true national title contender. Oregon fans have hated me for saying that at times, but I think that if you're an Oregon fan, you can look at this year's team and the athleticism, physicality, and the measurables of some of these players compared to last year's players, and this year's team is clearly more talented. Doesn't mean they're as good, but their ceiling is higher. Last year's team featured Dylan Gabriel, a secondary that didn't really have anyone above 6 foot, and it was full of transfers and really old players that were together. In fact, Oregon last year was a lot like Indiana last year in a lot of ways, where you put together a well-coached team with a good culture. You do have some NFL talent. They had more NFL talent than Indiana. We're better than Indiana for sure. But now you're approaching a point roster-wise where you are one of the apex teams, and you're no longer having to punch above your weight class to win titles. You just have to punch at your weight class. The problem is Dante Moore and this Oregon passing offense have some inconsistencies and some kinks to work out. That is going to be tough sledding against an Iowa defense that is among the nation's best and back to forcing takeaways. Iowa is intriguing because the Iowa State loss looks awful, but I also believe that Iowa is a much better team than they were in week 2. Iowa's one of the few teams. This has been overvalued a lot. People say, oh, this team's way better now than they were then. Or, no, actually, it's this team who is. And I think a lot of that's nonsense. I think a team outside of Alabama who is truly transformed from week 1 to week 11 is Iowa. Iowa's secondary went from looking like, oh, it's going to be even worse than last year's secondary, to really clamping up. And I know Wisconsin, Penn State, Minnesota. I know. And Rutgers torched them. But against Indiana, outside of like 2 or 3 plays, they did a really good job limiting that offense. A really, really good job. And look, Rutgers has really amazing receivers. It's not a shame that when Rutgers was hot early on that Iowa gave up some points to them. Minnesota, I mean, Drake Lindsey was playing really well in parts of October before that blowout happened, and Iowa absolutely humiliated him. So I think there is merit to say Iowa's getting better as the year has gone on. It helps that a lot of these players didn't start or play much last year, especially on defense. So now that they are there with good coaching, they're really leaning into things. They're 6-2. They're 4-1. They probably have the best loss of the year to Indiana at home in that close fashion, while also having one of the more puzzling losses of the year to Iowa State. But Iowa State's a rivalry game. Just so happens that they lost on that day. Whoever had the ball last was going to win, and it helped that Iowa State was still hot, confident, and had Rocco Becht. Some of my thoughts on this game are boiled down to a few takeaways. My early thoughts here are, does this game potentially feature the best lines of scrimmage in football? Iowa's D-line with Ethan Hurkett, Max Llewellyn, with Aaron Graves is nothing short of amazing. And behind that, they have Carson Sherrar. They have Jaden Montgomery. Don't forget Bryce Hawthorne, Jonah Pace, Will Hubert. They have a deep D tackle room. Kenneth Merriweather, Brian Allen. It's a deep unit. And then offensively, Trevor Locke, Jennings Dunker, Bo Stevens, Logan Jones, Cade Piper. And then behind them, Bryce George, Leighton Jones, some players who are very capable and would start in other offensive lines. They're just at Iowa, who has one of the best O-lines in America. And you're going up against an Oregon lines of scrimmage, where I know the Ducks have had some of their struggles, but no one is bigger No one is larger. No one is more freakish on the offensive and defensive line outside of maybe Miami than they are. And I don't even think Miami is, because I don't think Miami is the D-line that that Oregon does in terms of depth. I think Oregon's a little bit deeper on D-line. Miami's deeper on the offensive line. But given Miami's recent performances and how when I watch Miami try to run down people's throat and when I watch Oregon try to run down people's throat, it feels like Oregon does a better job at that. So I would lean Oregon at lines of scrimmage there. Maybe I'm wrong. No doubt that no one has Ruben Bain Jr. on their D-line, for sure. But Isaiah World, Emmanuel Pregnon, Iapani Lololu, Dave Uli, Alex Harkey, Matthew Bedford, and then their D-line of Mateo Uyunglele, Bear Alexander, Amari Washington, Tatum Tuioti, Terrence Green, Tione Gray. Wonderful. Wonderful unit. The line of scrimmage play that will be featured here will give you a peek of what some future NFL D-lines and O-lines will hold. The defenses are strong. Iowa in efficiency is 5th defensively. Oregon is 4th. The only teams ahead of them, per ESPN's efficiency, are Texas Tech, Indiana, and Ohio State. Interesting, to say the least. I say that in the sense that you got a lot of Big Ten teams up there. Part of that's because the Big Ten does not have a lot of good offenses, don't have a lot of good offenses that at least can scale against good defensive lines. Like Washington. Washington in efficiency has an offense that's 8th. It's not a top 10 offense. When they go up against defensive lines that are better than their O-line, like definitively, they fall apart. Case in point, Michigan, Ohio State. If it would be the same thing if they went up against Miami. I think same thing, Texas Tech, Indiana, Oregon, Iowa, you name it. So you got 2 top 5 defenses here. And if you disagree with that, they're definitely top 10. But then you pair that with the ball control that both of these teams have. So whoever wins turnovers here, especially if it's Iowa by 2, if Iowa has a 2 turnover edge, I mean, really, if any team does, Iowa probably needs 2 turnovers to win, like a +2 turnover margin. Oregon, if they simply win the turnover margin, they could win. But also, given Iowa's style of play and how Dante Moore doesn't really turn it over, but he takes sacks, that's a little bit more intriguing. I think that Oregon could win the turnover battle and lose. Iowa could too, but it's probably less likely. It's more important that I think Oregon takes care of the football here. And that might sound confusing or even counterintuitive because Oregon's more talented. But ball control will be important. Both these teams have tremendous rushing offenses when they want to. You look at the offensive numbers for a game on paper. Looking at EPA per rush, Oregon is 9th and Iowa's 23rd. You look at yards per rush, Oregon is 2nd and Iowa is 41st. But given they've played, Indiana, given they've played a healthy Iowa State defensive front, and that, look, I think they have a pretty good rushing offense. I mean, when you look at success rate, which success rate's more important because yards per rush can be manipulated by big flukish runs. Iowa's 8th in rushing success rate, Oregon's 15th. Iowa, in terms of havoc plays allowed, which has a lot to do with the O-line, is 16th, and Oregon is 5th. The trench play, the ball control, the capability of going on 10-minute drives is going to be off the charts here. So, all that being considered, you go to some things that are more off the field, more sideline or environment-based. So, there's Kinnick. The fact that Oregon has to travel to Kinnick. They've traveled to Penn State. Then they traveled to Rutgers. This is their 3rd trip out east. Thankfully, they get a bye, and they get a 12:30 p.m. local kickoff for them. Not a 9 a.m. one. That would have been hell. But you could also argue that Iowa will be more up for the game since it's not a noon game. Noise, travel, weather, the history of Iowa getting turnovers and getting upset wins in Kinnick. That's a lot to look at. And then there's the coaching edge and game plan. So which staff better utilizes the bye week? which staff continues their team's path to improving. And yes, I do think that Oregon is this team that will continue to trend up as the year goes on. Iowa should too. And also special teams. Iowa's a big special teams edge here. Oregon special teams are like Ohio State's. It's pretty. I would not want to have that special teams unit. I would not. There's no reliability for kicking. Punting is good, but the return game, the kick game, just not where it needs to be. Again, preview and prediction officially for this game after I watch some film and highlights will be out sometime tomorrow. Thank you for watching. I have such an admiration for both these teams as I do for the vast majority of Power 4 teams, given the talent they have, the coaching, and how hard it is to play this sport. This will be a fantastic game, and one thing I do know is that whether Oregon covers or whether Iowa covers or whether who wins, even if Oregon wins this game, I do know that first quarter will be tight and it will be electric, and probably that'll extend to the first half as well. We'll see. That is not me hinting at, by the way, picking a Oregon blowout. That's not what I'm doing. I think that's one of the that is a chance at happening. I could see Oregon coming in and doing what they did to Utah in 2023, and this game's just ugly. I could see that happening. I'm not picking that to happen, though. I just want to make sure that that's not a hint. Oh, Mr. Bucknuts, 16-13 Iowa. That would be an all-time game. And how funny would that be to be the inverse of last year's Oregon-Wisconsin game? How funny would that be? How funny. Iowa 20, Oregon 17. That is something I'm actually worried about a little bit, is that I feel like people picking Iowa is going to be a little bit trendy. And in theory, Iowa should be able to punch with Oregon, but Iowa is not Indiana. And we know this. They're not Indiana. And while they played Indiana close, I feel like part of that was also the spot, where coming off the Illinois win and not having D'Angelo Pons, if they weren't going to get up big in the first quarter, it was going to be like hard to really pull away. So I could see Oregon winning this thing by 20 plus. It would take 4 quarters to get there, but I could see them controlling. I could also see Iowa winning by double digits, given how Oregon has played offensively. And if I was able to get tons of sacks and create sustainable drives with their run game and maybe pass game a little bit, who knows? Let's talk about this LSU coaching search, though, and then we'll do Brian Hartline, Penn State, and that will be it. LSU deserves a coach who can compete for national titles, not a coach that goes to the beach on bye weeks, or that takes time off during important recruiting cycles, or that jumps in on recruiting in the portal and investing in the portal last minute after a year before saying we don't pay players, as if that's something to be proud of. They don't deserve Brian Kelly. They deserve better than that. They deserve a coach, and they need a coach who will compete for national titles. So let's go through this coaching search and who I think the top candidates are. And I think that it's good in these videos, articles, these topics to always cast a wide net, because you never know. Whoops. Did not mean to bring up the Big Ten standings. Just pretend that didn't happen. Pretend, please, that didn't happen. Who can lead LSU to their next national championship, or at least not take a vacation to the beach during a bye or during an important recruiting cycle or event? Who can compete for titles? Who can bring LSU to the playoffs and maximize the talent they have? Not a Brian Kelly. LSU deserves better than Brian Kelly. Let's cast a wide net and look at who I think LSU's top candidates could be. And I say a wide net because we're going to be talking about plenty of names, because typically these coaching searches result in someone being hired that many didn't expect. So I want to cast a wide net and try to at least have that name be on the list. And it's intriguing to play these games and to spin the die and roll them. Future head coaches, let's start there. Current coordinators who I think are destined to one day be head coaches given either their youth or how they've performed. Shannon Dawson from Louisiana. He's had success at Miami. I know their offense this year isn't as good as it was last year. Part of that could be a Mario Cristobal thing or a Carson Beck thing, though. You also got Ryan Grubb. I know he looks old, but he's only 49. OC at Alabama. Has had a ton of success there. And at Washington, has been to the NFL, so knows what it's like being under pressure, trying to utilize talent. Don't know how elite of a recruiter he would be, but if you surround him with recruiters and he's open to NIL and he's willing to fundraise, you could probably take care of that. And then you got Colin Klein at Texas A&M, former Kansas State offensive coordinator, produced the best years under Chris Kleiman there at KSU, star quarterback, and has had success at A&M so far. For the defensive coordinators, I give you Glenn Schumann, learned under Kirby Smart. Dan Lanning worked out for Oregon. I know that Schumann hasn't fielded the defenses that Lanning did, but he also, didn't deal with the same roster, didn't have the same players. So I don't think that him or Smart have forgotten how to coach defense. Things have just happened. Let's just put it that way. I think Glenn Schumann would be a good hire. Blake Baker, maybe you go internal. He's fielded good defenses. He has been the best coach for LSU this year. Maybe you give it to him. You let him spin the wheels. And also Corey Heatherman. He's a quick riser. He's worked with Curt Cignetti, worked with Mario Cristobal, PJ Fleck. He knows how to do more with less. Imagine giving him LSU's resources, giving him a crack at the head coach spot. Maybe it pans out. But I think LSU will want to go after a head coach. Just saying, look out for maybe these future head coaches. Maybe they take a risk and it really pays off here. Gosh, I messed it up again, but I'll go back and edit that. Who cares? For coaches who I think are out of the box, coaches who are definitely not on the top of the paper, the top of the spreadsheet. Jed Fish from Washington, offensive guy, quarterback guy, rebuilt Arizona, looks like he's rebuilding Washington. And they have been able to recruit fairly well at both Washington and Arizona. Remember Elijah Rushing? He nearly went to Arizona. Jed Fish nearly got him. Remember, there's no one else to remember, but he scouted and recruited DeMond Williams, and they have a current 5-star offensive tackle. So I think he'd be willing to recruit, and he's more than punched above his weight class. Manny Diaz, defensive guy who's adopted offense. Jeff Lebby, he's turned around Mississippi State and been in a lot of close games. He's also been at Oklahoma, been at Ole Miss. Again, these are out-of-the-box hires. These are not hires who I would even choose. And, I'm far from an expert, but I'm saying that as someone who, I think knows at least a little of what they're talking about. I'm not an AD. I'm not an expert at hiring head coaches. They're going to be even further down the list than I would have them, and I don't have them at the top of my lists. Dave Aranda, he's been at LSU before. It hasn't been pretty at Baylor, but you also don't have the same resources you do at LSU. And then I have Eric Morris from Texas, North Texas, and then Brent Key from Georgia Tech. Brent Key would be an A-plus level hire at just about any job in college football. If he wants to come to LSU, I don't think you turn that one down. Proven head coaches, so not quite the names who you make say no, but Josh Heupel, it's been rumored that he's in talks with LSU, don't know how true that is. Eli Drinkwitz, Clark Lee, Kenny Dillingham, John Sumrall, and Lane Kiffin. Any of these names I would be excited about if LSU hired them. Any of them. But especially the bottom names, actually. So Lane Kiffin, John Sumrall, Kenny Dillingham. Heupel and Drinkwitz could work. Wouldn't be quite as sold. Lee I would be pretty sold on. Yes, he's Brian Kelly's ex-defensive coordinator from Notre Dame. But look at what he did at Vanderbilt. Like, imagine what he could do with LSU's resources, which is going to be a theme for a lot of these guys, except for the names at the top. You make these names say no. I give you Nick Saban, Dan Lanning, Lincoln Riley, Marcus Freeman, Mike Elko, and Kalen DeBoer. Call them, make them say no. I took some coaches that I had for the Penn State job of making them say no off. So that included, I think, like Ryan Day, and maybe there was someone. Oh, Steve Sarkisian. I don't think Sark, if he were to leave Texas for another coaching job, would leave for like the one down the road if there was such an insane thing to happen. And if Day isn't going to coach in the NFL or at Ohio State, it's not in the SEC. I don't think. Just from like how he likes to run things. They're not leaving their current jobs, but in a hypothetical, exciting scenario of, pulling off an unprecedented move, LSU should call these guys and make them say no. Any of them, I think, would fit, would pan out. Same with most of the proven head coaches. But again, Ryan Day, Dan Lanning, Kirby Smart, Steve Sarkisian. Well, not really Steve Sarkisian, because he was a head coach in late 2000s, early 2010s. But in the mid 2010s or even early 2020s, a lot of your top head coaches were coordinators. So it's not always about hiring the biggest name right now, but who you think the biggest name is going to be in the future. I think that LSU is in a prime position to reestablish themselves as a power in college football. They should go after some big names just because of their history of winning it all and the talent they have. But if they fail, they should not be afraid of being more blue-collar, more under the radar, and hiring someone that they believe will work, even if others around the nation do not. And last but not least, we got Brian Hartline and why he would work at Penn State. That's what we're doing now. And after that, I am going to... I wanted to cook tonight, but I'm not going to have the time to. After that, we'll be done. I'll get these videos out. I will start editing for tomorrow's stream and grab a bite to eat. That'll be it. Gosh, I feel so good. Oh my gosh, Rhett Lashley from SMU would be a very good coach. Yeah, I think with SMU's money, though, it would take a full court press to get him. And I don't think with how the ACC's panned out in the ACC is genuinely weaker than the Big 12. The ACC is way weaker than the Big 12. Like Miami, if they had Texas Tech and Utah on their schedule, would lose to both of them, especially if they were on the road. And they could lose to like a healthy Arizona State. Because that's kind of what I think. It's kind of what I think SMU is, like a healthy Arizona State. Like you have high caliber players in some cases, but you're not very deep, and you got to win with good coaching and not like pure talent. So I don't think a lot of people want to touch ACC coaches outside of Brent Key, because Brent Key has at least played Georgia every year. He's beaten Miami before. I know that I don't think anyone would want to pull Cristobal out of Miami. I don't think Cristobal would want to leave Miami, and I don't think anyone who could pull him away from there would want him at this point. Lashley would be intriguing. He's not going to Arkansas, I know that for sure. But LSU, he could go to LSU. LSU's the job at this point who could pull someone who's already signed a contract extension with the money and alignment that they might have. Let's talk about Brian Hartline and Penn State, though. Here's why Brian Hartline would be a hand-in-glove fit for the Penn State Nittany Lions. Hartline was rumored to have met with Penn State earlier last week, leading up to the Penn State-Ohio State game, interviewing for their head coach position. Whether that is actually true or not, some people close to me have said it is true, but they can't completely verify it. I believe that Hartline would be a perfect fit for Penn State. I will also be making a future video talking about why I think Brent Key would be a perfect fit for Penn State. He is another person of interest who's been rumored to have met or be meeting with Penn State sometime in the near future. Let's check out Brian Hartline, though. So He's perfect because he's been mentored by the best. And we've seen before, whether it is Dan Lanning, DC under Smart, assistant under Saban, Ryan Day, OC, an assistant under Urban Meyer, whether we have, and Chip Kelly too, credit Chip Kelly's influence, or whether it is, say, Steve Sarkisian, OC under Nick Saban, OC under Pete Carroll. You get the idea. Curt Cignetti, Saban assistant. A lot of the best head coaches and Mavericks at one point were assistants of other greats. And that is Hartline. So Hartline, he's been in high-pressure situations. He has been in a highly competitive job. He took Zach Smith's wide receiver room, which was good, full of athletes, and he made it way better than it was then, upgraded it. I mean, Zach Smith has even said on his podcast that Hartline told him, I want your job. Like that takes courage. That takes some level of gumption and courage to tell someone, I want the job you have right now. I want that. I want to replace you. And I imagine he's had the same thoughts about the OC position at Ohio State, maybe the head coaching position at Ohio State. He is a alpha personality, a go-getter, tireless worker, and similar to Cignetti and similar to Day, similar to all these great coaches, has that arrogance about him that isn't crippling, but that is the sense of, I want to be the best, so I got to think I'm the best all the time, and I'm going to tirelessly work and outdo everyone because I'm that guy. Like that type of arrogance. I mean, some might just call that confidence. He's been mentored by the best, Urban Meyer and Ryan Day, who won each at Ohio State a national title. Day's won 1 Big Ten title. Meyer has won 3 Big Ten titles at Ohio State. Also came from the school that has owned Penn State year over year over year. So you're taking away from a rival, but more importantly, you're getting the blueprint from the team that's owned you for now, I believe it's 9 straight years? Yeah, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 9 straight years. Another reason why it'd be a perfect fit is that Hartline is an elite talent evaluator. Name me a receiver of his that didn't deal with crippling injuries that was a bust, like collegiately, not NFL. You cannot. I actually think Jaden Ballard, I forget, maybe, did he deal with any injuries? I think maybe 1 or 2. Fleming dealt with them every year. The others that have stayed healthy and that were viewed as elite at one point or another coming out of high school have panned out. So you are talking about Jeremiah Smith, Cornell Tate, Chris Olave, Diamond in the Rough, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Emeka Ibuka, Marvin Harrison Jr. Like 7 first-round wide receivers. It's insane. And it's not as if one of Quincy Porter Jr. or Chris Henry Jr., if they're developed by him, will be a guaranteed first-round wide receiver at one point. Maybe both of them. I know Innis hasn't exactly panned out as Ohio State fans would have wanted, but he's at least a good college receiver. I don't think he's a total bust. He's just not elite, at least right now, and he could evolve into that maybe at some point. 5 first-round receivers are drafted, and 2 more at the minimum are projected to be drafted in round 1. It's incredible stuff. He is the best position coach of all time. That, along with his leadership in that room and the consistency, are check marks in the boxes to become a head coach at a blue blood like Penn State. He's the ideal personality fit. I mean, we've already talked about this, but let's expand upon this for a minute. So at Ohio State, if you don't do well in a game, in a season, if you don't do well, you're fired. In a game, if you don't do well, the fans wish you were fired, even if you do well in every other aspect. The fans will cuss you out. The fans will call you all types of stuff. Ohio State fans, for the most part, are wonderful, but there's always a loud minority. And at Ohio State, especially because of the high expectations and the size of the fan base, it is a louder than usual minority of fans that are toxic, to say the least. And Ohio State fans will even laughingly admit to this. Hartline this year, I've heard people call him all types of mean, nasty names. I have heard people beforehand like overly critique his wide receiver development. No one will ever pay him the respect that he truly deserves as long as he's at Ohio State. It's a part of the job. It's the same thing with Ryan Day. A lot of people right now are saying that Day is like the inheritor of the Saban dynasty, which is like way over the top, insane, and dangerous. And it's dangerous because the minute he loses again, they will call for his head. It will be that bipolar flip of the switch, which is really unfair to him. It's part of the job at Ohio State. It's the same thing at Alabama, and those are the two best programs in college football history. There's no coincidence that that attitude primarily resides there. He's the ideal personality fit at Penn State because despite the fact that Penn State fans, at least the loud minority, are not that rabid, the AD and athletic department, I think, is getting to a point where they are as hungry as Ohio State's is. They want to win it all. That will be a high-pressure situation. To succeed the guy who helped Penn State back from sanctions and who reached the playoffs and appeared in Indy twice, and that wasn't good enough, and now they want to take that next step in a post-NIL and portal world, that requires a guy who can handle high pressure and balance listening to authority with doing things his own way. That's the ideal personality fit for Penn State, is what Brian Hartline has. And last point is he is a young blue-collar coach. He is not this person who came from old money and inherited something amazing and just rode that to death. He, again, improved Ohio State's receiver room, made it a historic, greatest of all time caliber unit, and he's young. He's interviewed for head coaching spots before, like for the West Virginia head coaching job. Someday he will be a head coach, and I think that Penn State should consider pulling the trigger here, because imagine if this pans out and he can recruit receiver. He knows, because he, as the OC and wide receivers coach, is to go up against elite defensive talent every day, and you have the, elite offense that he's around all the time with his receivers and learning how to work his receivers with the offense as a play caller. He knows what type of talent it takes to win it all. He's been in high pressure, big rivalry, big game spots before. Think of all of those Michigan games, a lot of the Penn State games, the playoff run last year, the Oregon game last year, the Notre Dame game in 2023. Think about that. This would be perfect. Pending the staff additions or who he retains from that staff, I'd grade it as an A+ hire. Brian Hartline to Penn State just makes sense. He's not the only candidate at Penn State that would make sense. I think Penn State's a wonderful job. I think it's well positioned to become a top 5 program if it takes certain steps. And Hartline's one of those coaches for Penn State where if they get him, I think they will be taking steps towards winning a national championship at some point. That's all, folks. That's all for today. I have to get these out and prepare for tomorrow's live show. Yeah. Thank you for watching, guys. Really, I appreciate it. We've maintained good viewership throughout this, and these videos will be up. More will be up tomorrow. And have a great day. Have a good night. And thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you all.